Doesn't phase them at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 10:04, so if we can find our seats, we'll go ahead and get started. And I think there may be a few people who join us in progress.
Yeah. Oh, is he involved?
Yeah. We're always earlier this year.
Yeah.
Texas State is
That's what we're calling our groups now, pods.
Well, good.
the president wants everybody back in place.
Pretty busy the last few weeks.
Good to remember. Good to know.
I'm flying up to Hong Kong again the next week, so that you
Okay. Well, I'm going to try and get it all
Tell you my
out.
name?
Okie doke.
Good morning. How are you?
If I don't raise mine, I'm about 4 feet.
You and
Here, that's good.
Ready for that? The week after we get back.
Morning, Mike. How are you? Well, I want to welcome everybody. It looks like once again we're going to have excellent participation on a committee of SAGE advisors that averages or that has 20 members to have the average participation we have, which is about 80%. It's pretty darn good. So give yourselves a pat on the back for that. And today's meeting is going to focus, I think, as everybody realizes, on academic productivity and efficiency. This is our fourth meeting, but it's the second of our topical categories. Last meeting, as everybody will recall, we dealt with outcomes-based funding. Today's topic is on academic productivity and efficiency. In April, on the 13th, we will go after the topic of facilities, and then in May, our final topical meeting will be on operations. We're going to cover basically three areas of academic productivity today. Faculty productivity, the use of information technology in teaching and learning, and finally, kind of a variety of distance learning, course design, and other tools and alternatives to new campuses and reducing program costs. So that's where we want our thinking to be today. We've got some good and exciting content experts to talk to us. And with that, our commissioner is not here yet. He's still embroiled in another meeting, but will join us. So I'm going to assume he's got no comments. And we'll move on to entertaining a motion to approve the minutes. Move for approval. Second. A motion from Richard. Is there a second? Second. Second from Earl. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All those that didn't read them just don't admit to it. All right. David, would you like to introduce our first speaker?
Yes, I would.
No.
Oh, Patty's got to lay out the rules. I'm jumping ahead of our facilitator here, which is a big no-no.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, so I handed out an updated version of the cost efficiencies that you've already identified. I think you'll see today that we'll be adding on to some of those we've identified. What is in black print is from the first overview meeting. What is in blue is what we added after last week's outcomes-based meeting. I think when you look, for example, at number 2, and I've labeled these just like an Excel spreadsheet so we can go through them, but number 2, which is utilize course redesign to leverage and reallocate faculty time, will probably be one of those topics that we cover today, or at least touch on. We have changed the groups so that you have the opportunity to work with some new people and perhaps help generate some new ideas. Those that are at the top of this list, 1 through 8, are those that the group agreed on as we came back from the smaller groups to the larger groups, and those are the ones we've rated. So those are the highest rated. You also have your worksheet so that you can work throughout the day and capture ideas. And I will be right here watching every one of you. Okay, thank you. Okay, Fred.
Thank you for reestablishing the ground rules, and I see that our small groups are now called pods. I'm not sure if that bodes well, but we will be working with new folks today. Commissioner, I just told the group you didn't have any comments, but
I don't.
Did I fib?
No.
Okay.
Well, let's move ahead then. I'm really glad to introduce our next speaker. He has a long career. Many of us in higher education have followed his worked for many years. He is an emeritus professor at Stanford University. He was a member of the School of Business, held numerous administrative appointments. But I won't name all the titles. But if you look at his bio, you'll see he's written extensively in the area of the topic you guys are addressing in terms of higher ed, and that's fairly unusual to find faculty members that are doing that. And on a personal note, I'd say watching this somewhere down in Houston is David Bell. He's an administrator at the University of Houston that was a former student of yours many years ago. So he was excited to hear you're here, and he's should be proud of his efforts at that institution.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It really is a pleasure to be here for a number of reasons. I applaud what you're doing. I've worked in this particular vineyard for some time, and I must say there were many years where people didn't seem to be listening. And the fact that you are doing what you're doing, Texas is doing what it's doing, I find really very, very, very exciting. There are, as you know, a number of forces that make this the right time to move America's traditional universities from basically our mid-20th century roots to the 21st century. I say mid-20th century because that was the GI Bill and Science, the Endless Frontier, the Vannevar Bush, that really expanded things enormously and set much of the pattern that we have today. The factors, as I've thought about them, are four. Cognitive science, that is the science of changing the brain. This is the outcomes of research. 7 or 8 years ago, they weren't ready for prime time. Now they are. I want to talk a little bit about those. Information technology, of course, and Carolyn will talk about that. And, of course, expansion of the college-going population, but not equal expansion of the money, because we have to find ways to do it at the margin with less than we average now. And then, of course, there's new competition both within the U.S., and Jorge's organization is kind of a poster child for that, but also abroad. I spend a lot of time overseas, and I see what those institutions are doing, and in some ways they are ahead of us, and so we need to take cognizance of that. Changing, wicked problems, as the Australians say. They like to talk about wicked problems. I won't take time to define it, but you can imagine. And a certain and frustrations, because our institutions are wonderfully strong, and our faculty are wonderfully strong and talented, but they don't always do exactly what other people might like them to do. I think that's a conservative statement. So there are frustrations, but there are solutions, and that's really my message to you. Is there are solutions. It is possible to teach more students at higher quality with the same or even fewer resources. And the whole variety of things, and you're looking at some of them. You can shift instruction to lower cost institutions or online, or high schools do more, better preparation. All of these things could reduce the instructional demands of students that are in the universities and institutions. Times to degree are probably too long, in my opinion. I suspect yours. And there's too much rework, too many failures of courses, and people that can't get their courses, and people that just plain drop out. So that's one of the mantras of the quality movement is reduce rejects and reduce rework, and so you're on that. But the one that I want to talk about really is Dennis Jones teed it up in your last meeting, changing the educational production function. And so that's the heart of my talk. We could talk about the other things, but there's not time. And I think it's of the utmost importance for a number of reasons. First, obviously it's intrinsically important if we can do what we're doing better. But also, I believe that our traditional universities, our four-year institutions in particular, public and private, I think there's a danger if we don't make these changes, if we don't change the educational production function. Our investment in those institutions may become, may be jeopardized, stranded cost as competition comes along. And so I think it's terribly important to protect our existing investment, and for all of us who are in those institutions to protect our situation. So change is, I believe, imperative, changing the production function, whatever else we do. I think it's important to understand at the outset that traditional universities provide a huge reservoir of talent, energy, and goodwill. So I having been a faculty member, I think that it is a mistake not to celebrate what our institutions do right. They do a lot that is right. The trouble is they don't quite do everything that they might do. I think the problem is fundamentally one of organizational learning. I used to teach business, as David said. It's organizational learning. There are too few good productivity models for faculty productivity, and so we have a chicken-egg problem. There are a few models, so people don't use them, they don't work with them, they don't improve them, and because they're not working with them, they stay relatively crude, and then people don't have the incentive to use them because they're not known and they're not very good. Oftentimes we jump to rules and incentives and accountability, and all of those are important, but they're not sufficient. If the organization doesn't exactly know what it is that it's supposed to do, you can hold it accountable, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So I want to talk about that. And the cognitive science that I mentioned, it can help with that organizational learning. It's, after all, it is a learning process. And the first principle of cognitive science is, I found it strange, prior knowledge about something not only can help learning, it can also hinder it. And there's lots of evidence to this effect. If you have a model that doesn't square with reality, you have to unlearn that model before you can find your way clear to moving forward. And I think when we come right down to it, that what goes on in our institutions needs some unlearning. So if I can move ahead here, I'll get that one. Okay, doesn't seem
Probably a little technology problem.
Yeah, help. You can read the cartoon. That cartoon is 20 years old. That shows when some of us started working on this. I'll just go right ahead, and we'll see if we can move ahead 2 slides there's when you interview faculty, what you typically get, even today, is a sense of what productivity is. There, hold that. That's great. And what you get is a sense that productivity means producing good results. And I should say, by the way, I'm going to talk to you through, I'm not going to go through all these things. You're going to have them as a handout right after I talk, as well as notes on what I'm saying. There just isn't time to go through it. We could talk at length about any and all of those, and we can in the Q&A. But just get a sense of this is some of the stuff that when you go out and interview faculty, this is what they give you. And we did. I was the head of the productivity study for the National Center for Post-Secondary Improvement back about 10 years ago. More than that, 15 years ago now. And we interviewed, and that's what we found, and you still find it. So quality depends on spending. Research automatically improves teaching. Research does improve teaching, but it's not automatic. And so on and so forth. And very importantly, when you talk to faculty about productivity improvement, they see that as code for cost cutting. And because there is this strongly held belief that in order to improve quality, you've got to spend more. There's something called Bowen's Law out there, and Bowen's Law says universities will raise all the money they can, and they will spend all the money they raise. And I used to be a CFO of a university, and it was my job to see that we didn't spend more than that. People really do believe that that's the key. And so when you talk about cutting cost, everybody resists it for all the usual reasons of personal interest and so on, but also because they really believe that's going to hurt the product. So we have to really present a better model, and the question then in organizational learning is how do we do that? So let me talk about the elements of a good productivity model for just a moment. And this has got to be a very high-level summary. We could go into more detail if you want. The first element is that we need time on task by faculty in departments. And what Carolyn is going to describe is a very successful set of initiatives of getting faculty to do exactly that. Working with faculty to do exactly that. Focused effort by teams of professors that work both on quality and on cost. And their technique is called course redesign. I had some experience with it back around the beginning of when you were starting. It really works, and she'll describe it. It provides a proven track record of what can be done. But, at least as of 2 weeks ago, at our National Academy of Sciences panel on productivity measurement, Carol, said, we were all lamenting that it's still hard to get adoptions. It's hard to get institutions to commit to doing this sort of stuff, despite the fact that it is a wonderfully proven track record. One of the concerns that, by the way, that is raised is, okay, supposing you figured out how to teach a course better, so that you've improved quality, you've got measures, you improve quality, and you show on your spreadsheets that you've cut, let's say, cost, I think the average is 37%, something like that. 37% over dozens and dozens of projects. Supposing you save 37% of faculty time and effort, but they got tenure. Well, it's okay if you can't harvest those savings right away, because if you have done the job and learned, got the learning how to teach the course in a different way, you can redeploy. The department will redeploy that effort to some other activity, a worthwhile activity, and say, okay, that's fine, but where is the cost being harvested? The answer is, at some point in the future, and alas these days, not the very distant future, there will be cost reductions, there will be budget reductions that are externally mandated, either by a set of regulators like yourselves, or just because the university is short of funds. And the point, and this business has discovered this over and over and over again, when the crunch comes, you will do what you have to do. You will cut the budgets, because these CFOs make you do it. If you have done the productivity improvement work in advance, you aren't cutting out bone and muscle. You are getting at stuff that doesn't hurt as bad. And so you need to do it continuously, and then you need to do the productivity improvement continuously, and then periodically you harvest the savings through budget reduction efforts. And you'll also find out, and one thing I'm sure Carol has found, I've found in doing this work, that when departments begin to address these things, they like it. It is not an either-or proposition with their research. Once they begin to unlearn those myths and find out what they can do, and they become involved, and then there's help available and facilitation and so forth, they find it exciting, challenging. They step up to it, and it's a win-win. So it is not an either-or with research. So let me just move ahead very quickly. If we could move to the next slide, please. I just want to just show you two slides. This one is learning principles from cognitive science, and you can look at it at your leisure. We don't have time to go into it. But this comes from Carnegie Mellon University. It's one of many things now.
So that means it's credible.
That means it's credible. I think it does anyway. And it's actually done. It comes out of brain research. People study what happens in various parts of the brain as you change, as people learn, and these are then things that are translated out of that. So some of them are obvious, meaningful engagement. Some of them, like the prior knowledge can hinder, is not so obvious. And when you really roll up your sleeves and start to do this stuff, it makes a difference. Next slide, please. And here are the same source. This sort of maps some of these principles about learning, how the brain changes during learning, to things that you ought to do as a teacher. And this stuff is actually used at Carnegie Mellon to help improve their faculty. Carnegie Mellon, again, it proves it's not either-or in research, because Carnegie Mellon is a first-rate research university. And things like recognizing and overcoming our expert blind spots, which one could talk about it at some length. I just wish that at the start of my teaching career, decades ago, I won't tell you how many, I had known this stuff. It would have made a fundamental difference in my teaching. This is just really I hope to convince you that there is something here, that there is something that faculty can learn. When they start learning it, they like it. It's not AV 101, as faculty are, say, disparaging. It's really good stuff. And I believe that in 10 years, we're going to find that faculty don't have command of this stuff. They're not doing their jobs. It's kind of like, how could you design a bridge if you don't know math? You could do it, but you're going to use a lot of extra resources, or it may fall down. It may not work very well. Another thing, of course, you can do is the applications of technology. Carolyn will talk about that. What I want to talk about the rest of the time is what I call routine departmental planning and data systems that focus on productivity. Carol is talking about episodic actions at the course level. I want to talk about things that a department can do and an institution can do, so that all of their departments are paying attention, are doing this stuff in a systematic way. Let me give you some examples. The first one is something that I call academic quality work. If you, next slide, please. I have a book on it if anybody's interested. Again, we have only a few moments, called Academic Quality Work. Josie Bass published it, a couple of other people. It's based on work I did in Hong Kong and at Tennessee with the Tennessee Board of Regents and in Missouri. And Australia does similar things, as does UK, and so on. What it is the systematic application by departments of quality assurance and improvement principles. And the work is in these 5 areas: determination of outcomes, mapping the outcomes to the curriculum, careful design of teaching and learning methods, stuff that Carolyn is going to be talking about. She actually is talking about all of them. But learning and assessment, and then quality assurance. These are things that if departments really roll up their sleeve and spend time on, if it becomes part of faculty assignments, faculty workload assignments, you really make dramatic progress. And if you don't, you tend to be stuck in that same cycle of myths. I'm going out to Hong Kong next week to look at an institution that I looked at last about 2002, City University of Hong Kong. They have a really good track record of doing this stuff, and I just read their submission, and the amount of change that they have had since 2002, it just knocks your socks off. Things, and it's very practical stuff. They are doing it, and they are measuring it, and they are demonstrating it. And a department, when you go in and look at them like that, if they're not doing this stuff, you can tell right away. You ask them, well, how do you know that you're doing, the right, that you are delivering optimal quality at optimal cost? And that the answer you get back tends to be, well, we know, we're professionals. We know because we know. And it doesn't take very long to figure out. And by the way, the person on the other side can tell, as you have that conversation, knows just as much as you do, the interviewer, that there is something that is missing. Next slide, please. One of the things that we use in doing this systematic academic quality work is some principles. These are ones that I've distilled out. They actually worked with Jack Grayson at the American Productivity and Quality Center back in the 90s in Houston. And this is stuff that he has gleaned from his work with quality in the business community and with governments. So again, these are principles, and you can find out when you go in and talk with departments, you can find out whether they're doing these things, and if they're not, that's prima facie evidence that something can be improved. Next slide, please. You can also assess the maturity of departments in terms of academic quality work. When you first start, the institutions in Hong Kong, for example, when we first started in the mid-90s, most of them were no effort or firefighting. You do something about quality when something seems wrong. And you assume, as one of those myths, that quality is okay unless there's evidence to the contrary. That kills quality improvement, that attitude. So then you move up, and I think what I'll find next week is that there's a lot of organized effort and even a lot of mature effort now in that institution. Okay, the stuff that I talk about in the book is mainly about quality, but the techniques extend to cost just as well. My current work is in the area of what I call departmental activity models, and I discussed those at some length in the chapter that I gave. I won't spend much time on them. It does tend to get fairly technical, but it's things that an institution can do using its data systems to provide systematic information that can be benchmarked, from which you can make inferences about departmental and therefore faculty productivity. I'd be happy to go into this in the Q&A. But basically what these models do is you can develop productivity dashboards. You can benchmark them against external data. You can do what-if analysis. If we change some of the parameters or change some of the policies, what is it going to do to cost? And then we make judgments, make sure that it's not going to hurt quality. Just one example. There is a strategy that some institutions are using more and more called the barbell strategy of designing class sizes or subsetting class sizes. And the typical thing is you've got a lot of classes. You have a few big lectures with breakouts, but if you in a few very small seminars. But the rest of the classes tend to be around an average, whatever you could afford in terms of student-faculty ratios. Well, it turns out you can generally do better in most fields if you have some larger classes and then a larger number of smaller classes, because the effectiveness of teaching tends to decline as the classes get bigger. Not always. A business school first-year courses can be an exception, but by and large, there's a diminishing. I mean, there's the larger the class, the less the learning. But it is a diminishing factor. So if you once you're up to a certain level of students in the class, adding another 10 doesn't really matter. You aren't getting much interaction anyway. And so it is better to, if you will, pay for a larger number of smaller classes by having a smaller number of large classes. And you need models to sort of balance that out. That's one of the things that these models do, figure out what you can do and how to do it. And the models that I'm working on, you can actually even do some mathematical optimization if you want, but that's another story. There's a couple of things that follow immediately from these models. First of all, if you're going to monitor and improve faculty productivity, you have to look at data and so forth. You have to control for field and student level. The phenomena are very different in the different fields and lower division, upper division graduates. So you have to control for field and student level. You've got to, and this is controversial, you've got to separate out the cost of departmental research from the cost of instruction. Now, departmental research is that which faculty do, and we do quite a lot of it in our good universities, that which faculty do that is not paid for by external sponsors. It may be in connection with an external grant or contract. If I'm a chemistry professor and I have an NSF grant for $500,000 a year with technicians and equipment and research assistants and all of that, I will get paid for the time I spend doing that in the summer. But I typically will not be, the university will not be paid typically for the amount of teaching reduction that I have to have during the academic year. And yet if I don't have a reduction in coursework, I can't manage a $500,000 grant. It just can't be done. So we do give teaching load relief, and we typically don't account for it, but there are techniques, and I discuss, I'm not the only one to be thinking of this, but it really is a high priority. You just can't get a handle on instructional productivity unless you separate out this cost of departmental research. The other thing is what I call the principle of differentiation. I already described the barbell strategy. Not all courses are the same. It helps to have a differentiation of class sizes. Typically in many institutions, not all, many institutions, we count a course as a unit of teaching load, work unit of teaching load, whether it's small or big or how complicated it is. That's kind of nonsense, to be honest with you. Everybody knows they differ. So let's find a way to systematically to agree on what the difference in requirements are. It's also helpful to separate learning tasks into first exposure of material, processing of material, that is interaction, and then feedback on material and other whole subjects. Typically, we put our our most expensive and scarcest resource into first exposure, which, when you think about it, is not the right way to do it. There are other technology can do first exposure, less costly faculty, et cetera, and use the faculty for the processing and to some extent the feedback, which is just ideas. And then finally, the department's profile of workload assignments. If everybody has more or less the same assignment, that can't be right, because different people have different profiles, talents, interests, abilities at any given time, and so you really need to manage those. It's not simply increasing teaching loads that may involve an increase in the average teaching load, but you're not just squeezing. You're trying to find the highest and best use within the department, the highest and best use of each faculty member in each year, and work that out and agree on it in advance, and then follow up. And that involves teaching, but it also involves academic quality work and research and other things. I would put before you the bottom line on this. If you go in and people look at a department and they are not differentiating these kinds of things in these kinds of ways, there is productivity gain to be gotten. There's lost productivity. And then finally, in order to get these ideas adopted, campus leaders, I'm thinking of presidents and provosts, and I've worked with a bunch of them. I haven't worked with any that are here, or I think any in Texas, actually. But first thing that the leader has to do, the president, the provost, has to really demonstrate the productivity. This sort of stuff is a big importance. And I've seen a lot of people give lip service to it, but when you follow through on it, you find, or you follow up, you find that it's not that serious a priority. Other things intervene. Then you can, provide people an infrastructure that we know how to do. And the point is to get this started on the campus. The best way to do it is starting to work with volunteer departments to demonstrate the new models, the new approaches, and in effect, that's what Carol Twig is doing, and Carolyn. So work with volunteer departments, demonstrate what can be done, get people excited about it, and then roll out the successes, and measure, find out as a central administration what your departments are doing. I would visit deans. We sampled departments in Tennessee and in Hong Kong, and I'd find that some departments really get it and they're really doing it. They're demonstrated maturity. Other departments aren't. They don't have a clue. And I go talk to the dean, and the dean that says both of these departments, and I get one of three answers. The best answer is, yeah, Bill, I'm aware of that. I've been tearing my hair out trying to get the people that aren't mature, get them up the curve. Let's talk about how to do that. Do you have any suggestions? That's good. The second one, alternative that you may get, is the dean says, I didn't know that. I had no idea. My reaction then is, but exactly what planet have you been living on? But the third one is the most damaging. It's, yes, I'm kind of aware of it. It's not my job to do anything about it. And the answer to that is, if it's not the dean's job to do something to bring the immature departments up on this, then whose job is it? And now to go switch immediately to the state level. It is possible, and that's what's being done in Hong Kong, and they do it in Tennessee as well. It is possible to use a technique called academic audit, where you send teams in and you can actually assess the maturity of academic quality work, and you can see whether they are using these strategies. You can see whether they understand the principles of quality and of cognitive science. And that turns out to be wonderfully therapeutic. It's more than just accountability. It's formative, because if you know that they're coming, and then you provide some help and so forth, you get a lot of departments beginning to pay attention and do different things. So it is a very light touch, but it's a very powerful light touch. And so it's called academic audit around the world, some kind of academic audit, which can be mounted at any level. It can be a system-wide administration, it can be a coordinating board, and you can even on campuses do internal academic audit. This institution I'm going to visit next week, they have done an internal audit over the last year of all of their departments on this stuff. And it was, and they report that, and it's very helpful. So my bottom line, and I'll stop now, my time is up, that it is possible to do more with less. We're talking about learning and money. But it takes some organized effort, some systematic effort at every level to get it done. Thank you. And who's got the handouts? Let's pass them around.
Thank you, Professor Massey. Really appreciate the way you present the topic of productivity, because it, as we learned at our January meeting, I think a lot of us were surprised that faculty interpret the word productivity as a code from here, Apache-style cost cutting.
Yep.
And your paper really identifies that it's neither that nor the simplistic adoption of business methods in the academic world. So.
Right. But business methods do have their contributions, but that's not, as you say, simplistic.
They do. In fact, what you just described, without using any of the buzzwords, really is the lean approach to quality improvement and productivity. And but I'll come back to that. I think we'll probably have some questions. And Laurie is our primary faculty representative. I think the questions ought to start with you.
Yes.
Well,
okay.
I don't disagree with anything that he said. I think that it's absolutely necessary. And I would love to take a look at the publication that you have there. So I'm in agreement with him. And I don't think that all faculty think of productivity as being something that is negative. I think that in the past what has happened is that it has been consistent that whenever we talk about productivity, we're talking about the cutting of costs, and that's why it has that negative connotation, perhaps. But I think that most faculty are interested in making sure that they're doing quality work, at the most cost-effective way, in the most cost-effective way possible. I teach 400 students, 400 freshmen, at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday and Thursday. And so I'm extremely interested in finding out how I can do that better in such a way that it's better for my students and better for me in terms of the amount of work that I'm putting into it, where I can cut. I think we're all interested in that. So.
Absolutely. And when you do talk to faculty, as you do, as I do, you find that there is an enormous reservoir of goodwill.
Absolutely.
They really want to do right by their students. They've just never addressed these questions. That's what I meant by the organizational learning problem.
And we find, one more thing, I think that one of the problems that we have as faculty, and I'm sure this will be addressed, is where do we find that time? Because if you're going to talk about tenure and you're going to talk about those other things that are required to be promoted and all of those things, where do we get that time? I love your cartoon. I think you're absolutely on target. You've got to publish. You've got to do those other things. And sometimes what ends up happening is the student ends up being the last priority because we're so interested in making sure that we have a career out there, a career that lasts. And so the problem that we find ourselves in, the quandary is, how do we do the best job, the most qualitative job, and find the time that's necessary to do the other things as well. So I think we'd be open.
Yeah, absolutely.
That leads me to the first two questions I jotted down, which I think are a good segue from what Laurie is asking. One is, where, if and where have you seen the use of lean tools at any institutions or systems as a means of accomplishing setting aside the time for these improvements?
Well, the one in...
And secondly, also the same question, where have you seen the best efforts on how to assure faculty that it is as much about quality improvement as it is about cost?
Well, the first one, as I said, the one that I've worked most closely with on this is the Tennessee Board of Regents. It's a 19-campus, it's not the University of Tennessee, it's a 19-campus system. I know you have an equivalent to it here, but anyway, they have caught fire on this, and they've been doing it, and it's described in that book. One of my co-authors is the Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs of that, Paula Short, of that system. They are using lean methods, and they are very excited about it. They've been doing it about 7 or 8 years now, I think, and it's rolling along of its own momentum. And as part of that process, we had to convince. We met faculty in groups all across the state, and they asked questions, and we had very good dialogue and convinced them. There are powerful arguments that it is not an either-or proposition. You still got to find the time, but usually what happens is you get some volunteer departments, which is how they started. Get some volunteer departments. Half a dozen people in a department will find the time. They'll band together. They find it very interesting. You give them some support. And oh, by the way, one of the things that happens when you get this thing rolling is there is publication to be gotten out of this. The scholarship, Ernie Boyer, wrote that book, Scholarship Reconsidered. Well, this is the scholarship of teaching. It really works. And then faculty really do like it. At the end of the day, you still got to get tenure, and if you're an assistant professor, you're limited in the amount of time that you can probably spend on this. But there's a lot of people that aren't assistant professors, and a lot of people that are better researchers or not so good researchers. And what I have tended to find is people who are very smart and very energetic, but are just perhaps not quite, they're not going to get their Nobel Prize. They're struggling to publish in their narrow discipline. You get some of those to catch fire on this, and they become extremely productive in this kind of scholarship.
So it sounds like the answer to the first question was also the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
The Tennessee Board of Regents, with whom you've been working, by the virtue of using lean methods, has found those methods help to reassure faculty.
Oh, absolutely. Exactly. Thank you. When the faculty see what it is, they say, "Oh yeah, absolutely," and we can do even better than anything that you said. And it's yes. So the answer is yes.
Just like to point out that we saw something similar when we were working with faculty on the mechanical engineering, which it was voluntary people got involved in, and the faculty themselves decided that to do what we needed to get to where they thought we needed to be, that they actually needed to identify learning outcomes for individual courses, which we did not ask them to do. They did it on their own because of exactly
that. It's the right thing to do, and when and they see it.
Roberto?
I'm a board member of a community college district, and we have been trying to get to this level, in terms of redesign and so on. The problem is there's a missing component always, and that is the availability of professional development for the staff and the time to meet and things of that nature. From your experience, what kind of organizational and policy commitment have you seen that's helped move this along?
Well, again, going back to Tennessee, but I could say exactly the same thing about Hong Kong or Australia or whatever. There are, in Tennessee, I think of those 19, 6 are community colleges or something like that. And the provosts of those campuses, or the chief academic officer, found some time, using discretionary money, the Board of Regents helped with some, project startup grants to get some experts in. It wasn't just me, I did some of it, but we got other people as well. And it does take a program. You have to mount a program, and I don't want to make this sound easy because it isn't, but most campuses have the kind of money that it costs to bring in some people to run workshops, and you're not asking people to teach a whole, you're asking them to come to a series of workshops and get started, and then a small number to get going on it. And once they do that, then it tends to run on itself. One other thing that they did in Tennessee, in fact everybody is doing that's trying this, is they use peer review as both an evaluation but also as a spur. You get the volunteer department, and you say, well, in 9 months there's going to be a group of your peers from this institution, so it's not very expensive. They're going to come in and spend 4, 5, 6 hours with you. They can afford that. You can afford that. And take a look at what you've done. You've done some reflection about what you're doing. You've tried some of these ideas, developed course objectives and mapped them in a different way, or tried something like course redesign. And now, and you'll write that up, and you'll make some proposals, things that you are prepared to do the next year about it. And now, as a group of 4 or 5 of your colleagues, they don't have to be from the same discipline, it turns out, in order to do this. They're going to come in and spend a day talking. Well, one thing faculty hate more than anything is to look stupid in front of their colleagues. They don't like to look stupid in front of their students either, but they really don't like to look stupid, right? And so they will, this now is a self-fulfilling, it's a virtuous circle. And then when you get these people coming in who were not part of the volunteer group, almost invariably, they go back to their departments and say, boy, we ought to be doing some of this stuff. So it's a process of innovation, adoption of an innovation, using principles, that are kind of known about that. And it's I don't mean to sound like it's easy, but it definitely is possible.
Well, my reason for the question was that it seems like we're in the people business.
Yep.
And you have to invest in people. And
absolutely.
The very people that are going to deliver the product need to be invested in.
Absolutely.
So that investment, I think, where it's a cost, but I think in long term the productivity will happen.
It will, and it's so I position it as an organizational learning problem. And to solve learning problems, you do need to make some investments generally to produce learning. And in this case, it's the investment of the staff.
Ray?
Have you had any? And you may have addressed this and I may have missed it, but have you had any student groups taking classes before and after?
Oh, yeah, this is typical.
And what's the feedback from them?
Carolyn, you may have some things to say about this. This is kind of standard operating procedure that if you don't have good before measures already, you really need to run a control group. At Rensselaer, one example that I gave back, this was the middle 90s, I guess, or so. The guy that did that got punished severely. He was made president of the University of Massachusetts. Jack Nelson. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, he's now retiring end of next year. But anyway, they ran into a problem their second time through. The control group revolted. The control group wanted the new methodology, and they had to switch it kind of midstream and give it to them because, students liked it. And by the way, that example shows something else. You could cut down on rework and rejects, dropouts and so forth. That was the reason RPI got into it originally. If you do a better job on this stuff, you do cut down time to degree, and you do increase graduation rates.
Professor Massey, I'm very interested in the issue of learning outcomes. That's figuring out a way to do that is one of our highest priorities in Texas.
That's
So
good.
we know
Yep,
that you can't
Yep.
get a handle on productivity unless we know how to do that.
Absolutely.
Do you know of any effective instruments for doing that? Is there a common instrument that you've identified anywhere? Does this have to be done on a course-by-course basis, on a department-by-department basis?
Well, the answer is I believe it's more like the latter than the former. A department needs to take cognizance of the kind of students that it has, not some ideal students. And you've got to, by the way, look at all the students, not just the top 5%. And you need to talk to employers. These are kind of axioms in this. And this thing, for example, is replete with a whole lot of this stuff. That's what they do routinely. But it's different. You can benchmark against a department sort of like yours in another institution, so you can get some insight. But by and large, you have to decide for yourself, given your students. And once you do decide on those objectives, and they involve skills and abilities as well as content knowledge. These days, that's very important. We understand that. You can then measure it. You can find ways at the departmental level, if you can articulate what it is you want to do, you can find out whether you're doing it. And that's the most powerful question, by the way, in one of these academic audits. How do you know that you're doing what you have said? And if you can't answer that, either you haven't put enough effort into figuring it out, or what often happens, by the way, is your goals, your objectives, learning objectives in the first place were so vague that you couldn't figure out. So the answer then is go back and rethink the learning objectives, get something that you can know at the end of the day, and that, people can do that. There are some general, the NESE, for example, or the CLA, does give you at the institutional level some sense, and those are very much worth doing. And maybe in time we will have some, general education measures. It's still early days, and what I say to departments always is look into those, use them, try them, but probably you don't want to stop with them. You want to do some of your own custom ones as well. And let's say if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, and the measurements start being departmental.
Professor Massey, if you've developed or has been developed as a set of processes that can drive academic productivity, and yet I think your comment was there's been a relatively low adoption rate.
Yes, in this country especially.
Right. So what seems to be missing is some institutional incentives to do that. And I guess my question would be, there's a failure to adopt those incentives. Are there going to be other organizations, maybe this is in the for-profit, that will move to these to drive the academic productivity? And that gets back to your earlier comment on stranded costs. So shouldn't the focus, at least at this level, be on what types of incentives can we put in place institutionally to drive this change in behavior?
Yeah, I think that's one of two foci that you have. I mean, I do say that, frankly, Jorge and his colleagues, if we don't do these things, they will eat our lunch, right? Dinner. Yeah, right. They won't stop with lunch. Absolutely. And that's happening, and you can see it. You can see it overseas as well. I couldn't help I was looking at the places where this Hong Kong institution, not one of their best, by the way, it's kind of a middle level, 120th in the world, I think, in the university, where they benchmarked. Well, one of the places, by the way, they did benchmark on something was University of Texas. But what they were benchmarking, that was on resource allocation systems. What they were benchmarking in terms of problem-based learning and outcomes-based learning and so forth, they had a long list of institutions, not one was in the United States. Anyway, so the answer is yes, it's a real danger. I think incentives are terribly important. I think, though, also you have to have conversations with the heads of institutions and and their colleagues. And I think there's two messages that need to come through. First of all, that you stand ready to help. I mean, that you can supply expertise, or you can point them in directions, you can help them frame it, and you can provide money, to help them do that, pilot projects and so forth. But the second one is also very important, and that is that this is not going to go away. and that a friend of mine was the president of a small place campus up in Missouri, and he had a vote of no confidence from his faculty the first year he was there, because he was a mover and a shaker. He's my former student, actually, doctoral student. But by the time I got there and interviewed about 10 years later, they thought he walked, they really supported him, really liked him. The Senate, was, and I said, what changed? He said, well, he convinced us of two things. First of all, that if he got one of these, he was not going to go away. He was going to be persistent. So maybe we rebuffed him on this one. He'll be back through another door. That was the first thing, persistence. The second thing was, if we tried it and it didn't work, he would be the first one to say it didn't work, and let's figure out what else to do. So why not try it? He had some good ideas and they made sense, and let's try it. I think there's, at your level, there's something like that it's not going to go away, but you are not going to do anything that throws the baby out with the bathwater. And that's not your objective. And so there may be some trial and error here, and you're in it with them, and I think that will help.
Professor Massey, and I'll come to you, Rick. This is a real key question for this advisory committee, so I want to follow up on what Woody was driving at, because you talk about the 4 different levels in your paper, and it sounded to me like you were saying that the real implementation responsibility lays at the department level.
That's my belief, yes.
But there are roles and responsibilities at the campus system, and what Woody was driving at, the state policy
Absolutely,
level.
yeah.
So can you, for instance, at the system level, you talk about disruptive innovation.
Yes.
Can you briefly just say, where the state can drive behavior like Woody was driving at with its policy, where that needs to leave off and go to the system and the campus responsibility?
Sure. Well, I'm not that familiar with the distinction between your coordinating board and the 3 systems in Texas, but yeah, right.
And there's some independent.
Yeah, right. Of course. But in general, I would say that it is possible for a system, as one of your 3, to provide. I'll give you an example, something that I did in Hong Kong, different, not as part of this, but as a member of their oversight. I was a member for 12 years of the equivalent of the coordinating board for Hong Kong. And so we ran a little exercise. It was a strong coordinating board, as we got the budget from the government and we doled it out to the university. And we had a funding model and all of that, and that was important. But one of the things that really worked was that we'd sit down with the heads of the 8 institutions and their senior staffs, and we would talk about if you will, the soft goals, the qualitative goal, like in productivity improvement, like doing some of the things we've talked about here. And we said, well, we'll just, what we will do is at the end of each year, we will ask for reports, and we reserve the right to come in and check, but, mostly we didn't have to. It was pretty clear. And there will be a pot of money. Doesn't have to be very big, and it's one-time money as far as the campus is concerned, that we will allocate on the basis of how well you have stepped up to these challenges. And we were doing it from system to campus. It could be done, I think, at any level. I think we put in 1.5% or 1%. It wasn't very much, but it was all public. It was all transparent. And so what that did was it really focused this question of what it is you would like them to do, and there was some accountability, and they had to report on it, and there was a bit of reward in it. And that gets, and what those campuses could do, and this can be done all the way down to the department level, deans can do this, it's one-time money. You can't build faculty positions into it, because you may not get it the next time, the next round. But what you can do is you can fill in some holes, you can get some equipment, you can do some traveling you otherwise would.
1 to 1.5% of what?
Of the budget. Of the
departments?
Yeah. I mean, we did it, the Hong Kong University Grants Committee, it was 1 to 1.5% of the total appropriation from the government for the 8 universities that we divvied up. That was more than enough. That got people's attention. So there's lots of schemes that you can use that involve money, and I strongly believe you do need to use those schemes.
Professor Massey, could you give me some sense of a timeline from starting at a system level, from some decision to rollout to at what point do you begin to influence the outcomes?
Okay, well, this is just really speculative, but supposing that...
Your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, supposing that you were to make a decision this winter, in spring, and you started a process of conversations with campuses, systems, and so forth. You do that next year, next academic year. The following year, you would have some pilot departments and some pilot campuses. So you'll need a year to get ready once the decision is made and have these conversations. And I should say, by the way, I'm not self-serving in this at all. I'm in the process of getting semi-retired. So, but you do need consultants probably to help on this. But take a year to get it organized, and then the following year you can get some pilots. And the pilots take about a year, or an academic year, finish up, and then the following year you roll it out another notch. You do the academic audits the end of that second year. So first year plan, second year do and audit at the end, and third year, recycle and roll it out some more. So that's kind of the timeline. That's an aggressive timeline, but I think it's doable.
Other questions?
Just an observation, just a quick question for the professor. I come at it from a Regents perspective, I guess, and the note that I took is that you've exposed the evil act of recruiting business executives to the Board of Regents, because we think in terms of productivity and all that.
Yes.
You spoke about the dean's unique responsibility for making it happen. What about the Board of Regents? How do they get the process?
Yeah, very good,
rolling?
very good question. I believe strongly that boards have not done nearly as much as they can and should do to get this stuff embedded. There is nothing like a board asking the executives of the institution, what are you doing? How do you know that what you're doing is right? What is your track record? And it's, again, we're not going to go away. It's just going to keep asking. Not that you would micromanage. A good board clearly will not. But you can ask those questions, and you can say, well, have you checked this out? Have you checked that out? That can work. And I think the problem has been for boards. By the way, I was a member of a corporate board for 22 years, a New York Stock Exchange company, and I saw how boards can influence. We did. And I also saw, by the way, how people within that company were always thinking about productivity, and I can make that contrast with universities. But I think boards can play a very strong role in just you're close. You meet every other month or whatever it is, and you can ask for reports. You can raise issues, and that you should not hesitate to do it. Many boards hesitate to quote get into the academic side of the enterprise. Well, you are and you aren't with this. You are not substituting your judgment as a board for the judgment of the deans and the faculty in the department. If you try that, it's a disaster. However, you can make sure that the deans and the faculty in the departments are thinking things through, are up on the latest stuff, they know what's out there, and the campus is organized to do the kinds of things that we've talked about. Those are board-level kinds of things.
Thank you.
Professor Massey, thank you. I think we've encroached 2 minutes into Carolyn's time.
Thank you. This has been wonderfully.
We appreciate the presentation.
And I wish you all kinds of questions. I do. Okay.
I think Professor Massey has already introduced to some extent Carolyn, and I appreciate that. But she does come to us from the National Center for Academic Transformation. Many of you are familiar with that group, some of you are not, but the concept of course redesign and especially the sort of these first exposure courses that Bill was making reference to. So,
thank you. One of the things that David didn't say is I actually happen to live in Texas. I live in Canyon, Texas, just south of Amarillo. So I'm one of those people who's interested in how you spend the money that you're collecting from those of us who are paying it. So I'll, open right away. I'm one of those people. The National Center for Academic Transformation was established in 1999, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, at the behest of Jack Wilson, who is now the president of the University of Massachusetts, because he believed that we needed to move beyond the couple of examples that they had actually done at RPI. And Carol Twigg, who is the president of the National Center for Academic Transformation, went to the Pew Charitable Trust, and they gave us a very large grant to frankly demonstrate that it was possible to do a lot of the kinds of things that Bill referred to a few minutes ago. We became an independent not-for-profit organization, a 501c3, in 2003. And we are a virtual center. We don't have a building or a headquarters. I'm actually the Western office, for what it's worth. And we actually work with colleges and universities to do two things: to improve student learning and to reduce instructional costs at the same time. Bill said there were many people who believe it's not possible to do these things together. If you improve quality, you will increase costs. And Carol said to the Pew Charitable Trust, we believe using information technology, you can do these two goals simultaneously. We wanted to show people you could do this. There was a lot of writing in the literature that said it was impossible, so our goal was to demonstrate, in fact, that it could happen. And we were attacking basically the three problems that higher education faces: access, quality, and cost, simultaneously, and then using information technology to achieve those goals. This is what we've done in higher education for years and years and years. We've done large lectures, we've done small seminars, and then as information technology became available, we did more of those small seminars and we lectured. And we haven't changed or leveraged the use of technology as effectively as we could. So that led to that first project that I just mentioned, and the goal was the same. We also focused on introductory courses, those large enrollment courses that every freshman across the United States was taking. Because we knew, frankly, if we started with the big ones, we could scale back to the smaller courses. But many of the kinds of strategies and techniques that faculty use wouldn't scale from 30 to 300 to 3,000. So we wanted to start with 3,000 and scale back. In the first 30 courses that were done, over 50,000 students were impacted. That meant that we were having a big bang early on, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make a difference for a lot of students. I think it's important for you all to know what we mean by course redesign, and it's become sort of a buzzword, a mantra over the last 10 years, but we have a definition that we apply, and that is, it's the process of redesigning whole courses. If there are 100 sections get redesigned. If there are 50 sections get redesigned. Not just a few sections here and a few sections there. And we do this for basically two reasons. One reason is the fact that if you're going to get that productivity benefit, you need to do it with all the students. So you may save in the cost per student $10, but if you have 3,000 students, you can save more money. If you can save $50 a student, you can do the math. You can save a lot more money. So we scale it for the whole course. Secondly, if you've documented that students are learning more, then why shouldn't all students be in the best learning environment possible? In other words, if we know that students are learning more math or science or English or whatever the topic may be, then all students ought to have the opportunity to learn more. So there's an ethical issue going on here also. In that first 30 courses, we had 13 of those that were quantitative, and in the smaller print are the names of the institutions that did a redesign of the initial 13 in quantitative. And you can see they range from community colleges, four-year institutions, research universities. So we had everybody doing it. Then people said, well, it'll work in the quantitative fields, but will it work in the sciences and social sciences? Fortunately, we had 5 institutions who were willing to give that a shot in the sciences, and 6 that did redesigns in the social sciences. Again, we have a mixture of institutions. We have a private institution next to a large research university. And so we were able to show that it would work. And you can imagine what the last result, the last holdout was. If it'll work in the quantitative, the sciences, and the social sciences, will it work in the humanities? And the answer is absolutely it will work in the humanities. Tallahassee Community College has redesigned English composition for 3,000 students. And so now every year 3,000 community college students are taking English composition, and they are succeeding at rates beyond what they succeeded at before the redesign. What were the learning outcomes? This is just a snapshot of some of the learning outcomes that, given that I know that you have copies of the slides, I don't need to read all these to you, but you can see Carnegie Mellon found, that CMU found increases, as did other institutions, and these are just selected. Everybody was showing that students could learn more. Notice also 5 showed equal improvement. Not everybody was concerned with the quality of what was going on. They were concerned with the cost of producing that quality. So some institutions said, we're okay with the quality that we have, we're just not okay with how much it costs us to get to that quality. So people determined what they were trying to achieve, but in many, many cases they were able to both improve quality and control the costs of what was going on. What about drop fare withdrawal rates? We all know nationally that failure is a huge issue. Look at the University of Alabama. That was an intermediate algebra course. At the University of Alabama, in some terms, 60% of the students were failing. Those of you who are good at math know that only 40% were passing, that meant. They have now moved it such that it is not any longer 40% failing, but they have gotten to the point where over 3/4 of the students routinely pass. 3/4. That was a huge benefit to the university. They didn't have to recruit. They were able to move students out into those technology fields, business fields, where math is a fundamental component. So the students are better off, but the university is also better off. As I told you before, some of the institutions weren't particularly concerned about drop fare withdrawal rates. Others were. 24 of them measured it. 18 showed improvement. You're probably wondering, if you're a good math person, what about the other 6? Let me tell you that at some institutions we have a little problem. Some of you may have identified this. It's called grade inflation. Once you have a situation in which there is a consistent set of outcomes that are being measured consistently, as Bill indicated, sometimes you do have some situations where there is more drop fare withdrawal rates because you don't have people passing who haven't achieved those learning outcomes that in fact have now been consistently established. One of the problems in multi-section courses across almost every university we've ever talked with is this inconsistency problem. And so some students are in fact passing when they haven't mastered the content they need. So we had some institutions who, through this course redesign process, uncovered, if you will, the obvious. And they were able then to say, well, now we've all agreed these are the learning outcomes which students should achieve, and we're able to measure them, and we've got some problems. And we're able to show that. So when we found some of these drop fare rates that didn't get as better as we thought they should have improved, it had to do with that grade inflation problem, which is, you know, sort of the hidden secret, frankly, that goes on. What about cost savings? As Bill indicated, on average 37% was saved, and we measure this by cost per student. We do a measure of the cost per student before the redesign. We do a measure of cost per student after the changes have been made and the redesign is completed. And there was a range between 15 to 77%. Collectively, they saved about $3 million annually on the redesign of these 30 courses. That's a nice chunk of change. One of the things that Bill also referred to is what happens to this money. We have a process that we have gone through with every one of the institutions that we've worked with, and part of that process is very important, and that is asking and learning as a group. The redesign team knows what will happen to the money before the redesign occurs. It's not a secret. And the benefit of this is, in most cases, the decision has been to keep it in the department. What happens to that money in the department? Let me tell you, every group we've ever worked for has a wish list in their back pocket. We would like to develop a new degree. We would like to offer more courses. We would like to expand our graduate program. We would like to, and they know what it is that they would like to do. This is a way to leverage the resources they have to meet some of those departmental, college, and frequently institutional goals. But this is decided ahead of time, so it's not a surprise. Some institutions have used the money for more institutional level goals. Maybe they'd like to do a better retention program at their institution, and there's no money to do this. Well, if you can release these funds, you can then have money that is usable for those kinds of institutional programs. But we do this, and we say to, when people apply with us, we say to them, what will happen to the savings? We don't tell them what to do, but we ask them to make those decisions as an integral institutional team. Then it's not anybody's surprise at the end. And surprises are not usually happy ones. We started with the 30. What have we done since then to scale? We started in 2003 a second program that was called the Roadmap to Redesign. It was funded by the Department of Education through FIPSE, the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education. We then moved to a second FIPSE-funded program called the Colleagues Committed to Redesign. We've also done multiple projects with states and systems where they have done internal competitions, and all of these national programs have been competitions where people are competing to be part of this. This does a few things. The competition raises their importance when they're selected. It makes them feel that they're working for a national initiative, and this has been very helpful to them. The Redesign Alliance is a membership organization. There will be a meeting at the end of this month in Orlando, Florida, and we are expecting 700 people. We have over 650 people registered for this meeting. That means that there are people out there who would like to make these kinds of changes at their campus because they recognize that they can have a positive impact on students, on their own workload, and on the institutional success. We have a new program, and it's called Changing the Equation. It's funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it's focused on a major national problem that I'm sure you all are aware of called developmental math. And the goal here is to work with community colleges across the United States to improve the success rates and to productively mean that more students are successful with developmental math. And I've talked with a couple people here today because I'd like you all who are from community colleges to think about getting your institutions involved in this. They will work with others across the United States in addition to the staff at the National Center for Academic Transformation. And we've got some excellent examples and approaches, and there's a whole set of guidelines that's already out there. But that's our focus at the moment. What can I tell you about our methodology? First of all, it's discipline agnostic, if you will. It works for all of them, whether it's literature, math, sciences, the social sciences. We have examples. We can now say, this is not a work in progress, this is not an experiment any longer. These are, in fact, workable ways to improve academic productivity. We know that it works with traditional students, with working adults, with students of color. We did a study back in 2003 that was funded by the Lumina Foundation to find out if it worked for some kinds of students and not others, because that was a typical question that people legitimately asked us. And the answer was, surprisingly, some of the groups of people had much higher success, like students of color, than some of the white students, because in fact it was an opportunity to get individualized assistance when they needed it without having, as Bill mentioned, they didn't have to look stupid in front of their peers. They could get help. They didn't know, other people didn't know whether their question was a foolish question or a very insightful question. It didn't matter. The student was getting help with the problems that he or she had with the content at that time. It works with small institutions. It works with large institutions. We've got a bunch of both. It works on campus and it works with online courses because we've had people do it in an online environment. It works with currently taught courses and it works with people who are developing new courses. And it works at all levels. We've had introductory courses, advanced level courses, and some graduate courses that have been redesigned. One of the good things about having over 200 examples is you have some of everything. And so people say, well, it won't work in, oh, but it will. What are some of those characteristics? And I think it's interesting because some of these you will see on the handouts that Bill provided a few minutes ago. We do redesign the whole course, not just a single class. We emphasize active learning, greater student engagement with the content of the course and with one another. We've always known if students did more math, they'd be much more likely to learn more math. We, in fact, now have strategies that get students engaged with the content, not watching the content and the faculty member being covered with chalk dust, but actually doing the math. How do we do that? These redesigns rely heavily on available interactive software, both used independently in some projects and in teams in others. We aren't watching people develop software. Most people are not effective software developers. There is an active, effective market out there in the software for these introductory courses. There is not a need for people to write their own. We increase on-demand individualized assistance, more students getting more help when they want to. Not faculty sitting in their offices hoping that folks will come because they might have a question. That hasn't been an effective strategy, and faculty will admit it. They just don't know what else to do. Now we have some examples of what they can do. We automate those pieces of that course that can benefit from automation, and we make decisions. What can be done better by the technology? What can be done better by other kinds of people? And what needs faculty to do it? And you'd be amazed at how much these other two groups can actually do for students. And that yellow piece at the bottom I think is important. Technology enables good pedagogy with large numbers of students. It enables us to do what we've done with 15 with 1,500. That's the real key. We have 6 models, and these are all greatly developed on our website, and lots of examples for each one. And then I just want to give you a quick overview of the names of the courses that people have redesigned. Because many times people say, well, have they done my course? The answer is amazingly probably. Done all kinds of sciences, social sciences. Look at the humanities list. It's amazing. And then we've done the business courses like accounting, that provide that barrier for students to succeed, as well as graduate courses in the curriculum. We've done engineering courses. Those of you who may be engineers, the Mississippi State University redesigned statics, which is one of those introductory engineering courses which provides barriers for students. What do the faculty say? It's the best experience I've ever had in my classroom. The quality of my work life has changed immeasurably for the better, and it's a lot of work during the transition, but it's worth it. What are the implications? First of all, it can be done. We're not in the experimental proving stage any longer. We got enough examples. We can decrease cost while increasing quality, and faculty are not the problem. Faculty are willing and interested in doing this when they understand it, what it is, as Bill indicated. The lack of leadership at all levels has been a problem. We need leaders who want to make change, not leaders who are uncomfortable rocking the boat. And we have a number of examples where if the leader did not be part of that active team, what we have is faculty trying to do their best in a situation in which there's an institutional problem that they're solving. Our website includes all kinds of descriptions, progress reports, monographs, planning resources. These are all free. There's no charge for using them. They were developed in the public sector, and they're absolutely free for people to go and get. And if there are people at your institutions that would like to do this, I would strongly suggest that you not only have them take a look, but have them send me an email, and I'm happy to talk to them. I'm happy to guide them if they can't find what they want. This is, I think, a situation in which we were able to take some of the principles that Bill talked about, and we've now been able to make things happen. And sort of that's a nice segue between the two of us.
All right, a lot of good concepts and a lot of good grist to mill there. Questions?
I have a question for you.
David?
That last comment you made about taking Bill's
material and basically incorporating that into what y'all do. You know, Bill, you had the example of basically the University of Tennessee, and Carolyn, you have a bunch of examples, and I'm just curious from one of your perspectives, either one of you, in terms of, Bill, is this basically, is what Carolyn is doing, is this what you've outlined in your studies?
It's entirely consistent with it. I'm not sure offhand anymore whether Tennessee has been one of your, it may well have, but what Carolyn is doing is one way to do what I'm talking about, in a very important way, and one that has been shown to work. There are other ways. I think at the end of the day, they probably all boil down to the same sort of thing. Namely, you apply principles of active learning, and you look at costs. So I think departments can, with all due respect, they can invent what Carol is talking about.
But they don't.
But they don't. That's the problem.
But they don't. I mean, one of the things that people have said to us is, well, couldn't people do this alone without you? Absolutely, they could. And we have a few situations in which they have. But let me tell you that most of the time, they have no idea what to do. And what we have is a process that, in fact, leads them through how to do this. Because if they could do it on their own, they would have done it already. Faculty are smart, and they are not incapable of doing it, but they're not doing it. And I think that Bill touched on at the end some things that fit in with what we found also. The need for what one of our now, somebody who worked with us, and now he's a provost at a campus actually in Tennessee, he's trying to develop a redesign-friendly campus. What does it mean to have a culture in which change is recognized and rewarded, supported, even when it doesn't always work? How do you include the scholarship of teaching? I don't know it's a scholarship of redesign, but at least of improving your teaching as part of that tenure and promotion. If in fact it's part of the mission, how is it measured? One of the things that we found that's somewhat problematic sometimes is we tend on our campuses to ask people how they like it. How did you like this course? Did it give you what you needed? You know, how did you feel about it? But in fact, what we ought to be doing is, did you learn X, Y, and Z? We haven't done as good a job at measuring learning and then using that measure as part of this tenure promotion process. And one of the things that differentiates our projects, I think, from some of the other efforts people have made is we do measure before and after learning. And Peter Ewell from NCHEMS has been the person who has worked with us on how we measure learning such that we consistently find out how much math were they learning before and how much math are they learning now. And that gets you out of, did you like it? And I'm going to tell you straightforwardly, some of the students in some of our redesigns early on have pushed back and said, I'm working harder than my friends worked when they took this course. They are. They are. And we teach faculty to say, you are. You are. But you're going to learn more math than your friends learned, or more English, or more whatever it may be, psychology. So there are some of these aspects that make faculty a little hesitant, and we need to develop an opportunity, as Bill was saying, for folks to take a chance, to try some things. And one of the things we always do is a pilot, because every one of these over 200 projects has met bumps in the road, as we call them. And when you meet a bump in the road, it's better to have 200 students angry than 2,000 students angry. So we help them get over the bumps in the road with a few students, rather than with the whole course. Then we scale, if you will, the full implementation the next term. So we have a process, a timeline. We teach the people to do this, and then we help them when they get pushback. What do I say to students who are complaining that they have to work harder? I've had sales training, I know.
Just to add a quick point, David's point, what Carolyn's talking about is re-engineering the course. And that's something you you really need to do from time to time. There is another approach that you can use as well. It's the continuous improvement approach. And I'll bet that once you have gotten people going, they then will do continuous improvement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, that's how the University of Alabama got from 40% failure rate, success rate to 60, and now they're up to 76. Because they continually learned what those little bumps in the road, and they got lower, but they still had a few, so they fixed those.
You know, it's striking that we tend to think about academic institutions as a whole other environment, but really what you're describing has a lot of parallels in our business organizations. When in my own company we started trying to adapt to continuous improvement 7 years ago, we struggled with many of the same things, the employees embracing change, the need to bring in an outside consultant because we weren't doing it on our own. So that's not unique to academics. Earl, you had a question, and then I think...
Carolyn, I was pleased to say that course redesign works for introductory courses, it works for advanced courses. But I'm curious, without getting into a tutorial on what's involved, do the techniques or the elements vary by discipline or vary by advanced level of the course? I mean, would the same techniques that I would apply to English 101 apply to genetics?
Some would and some wouldn't. One of the reasons we have 6 of the models that we've extracted from the projects as we've gone along is because there are some differences. We know, for example, the Emporium model works with math, and it works over and over in any kind of institution. Virginia Tech, where it began, has 25 courses in their Emporium simultaneously. This is very efficient, by the way. It's a big Emporium, but they're teaching 25 courses in the same space. Alabama has 5 in their Emporium. They have a much smaller Emporium. You run out of space. But the answer is that one works for math. Languages tend to use the replacement model, where they do writing, reading, and vocabulary quizzing online, and then they'd spend a reduced number of face-to-face times talking. And so, yes, they vary by academic discipline, but in other ways, they're very similar. I'll give you an example. All of them use software. All of them use commercially developed software. Some of it's from freestanding companies, some of it's publisher associated, and they make choices about which pieces of software do whatever it is that those courses need done. So there are a set of similarities, and then there are some differences. And now we have enough projects we can work with. But it's interesting because the reason we have an engineering and they're using the Emporium is because they heard the Emporium, and what they heard was, we are lecturing on the easy part. The tough part is applying the principles to the problems which we let students do on their own. What's the matter with us? So the engineers could hear what the model did and adapt. So they've streamed their lectures, which students can watch as many times as they want, but they're required to come to lab and work in small groups and solve problems. So once people understand the principles, they began to see this. Because we don't know enough about engineering, but the engineers could understand what we were saying and then build on it.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Bernie, did you have a question?
Yes, Dr. Jarman. I have a comment in, I'll call it Jesse Jackson speak, and then I have a question in Martin Luther King speech.
Okay.
But, when you said people of color, improve even more with these best practices than others, then, my Jesse Jackson comment would be, we have what could be considered purposeful academic genocide going on, with students of color who are stuck in the gap. So, the learning gap. So, that's harsh. That might sound harsh, but that's probably how Jesse would put it. But moving over to Martin Luther King, I do have a dream, and you tell me if it's possible. It looks like all this content is out there, and it's been developed and all that. Are we getting close to a time when we can pull together all the pieces of a free general studies online degree and remove the entire obstacle of affordability? can we have a 2-year general studies degree online for every person with a Texas driver's license or whatever, and remove the obstacle of people saying they can't afford to go to college? I don't think it would cost us. I don't think the cost factor would be that much based on all this content, this great content that you're talking about.
There is definitely a lot of content out there, that's for sure. I think the piece, and Jorge will speak to this, I think, probably more effective than I, but one of the things we have found with a number of students is while the online environment provides access, it doesn't always provide the supporting structures for all students. One of the reasons that we have the multiple models is not only the discipline reason, but because some students need some more face-to-face and the online doesn't work as well.
Could I comment to that? I mean, it would be optional. You could have the public option, and you could have the bricks and mortar option.
Yes, you could.
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The other thing that we have learned is students need help when they get a bump in the road. So even if it were free, even if the content were out there, we need people available, but they're doing different things, and they don't need all to have PhDs. So we need to have support structures for students, whether they're doing it on the phone, whether they're doing it asynchronously, or whether they're face-to-face. We know that it's not an either-or, that you give people the software and life is good. It is good for some students. We have evidence in our Tennessee Board of Regents projects with developmental math that some students, once they have the support structure, they have streaming videos of what the principles are, they can do 2 courses in 1 term. They can do this. But there are others who still move quite slowly and need a lot of help, and we need to be able to accommodate those students. Much of the software that's out there, frankly, is not free. Much of it is in the corporate market, and students pay for it. But the pricing is not extraordinary at all. It's very reasonable, very reasonable.
But back to my question, is it possible to put together what I call a free general studies 2-year degree online?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know about the free part. The only part that bothers me about it is the free part. But
much reduced in price. I mean,
yes.
you know.
Yes,
and so when I hire somebody and they don't have a degree, I can say, okay, I'll hire you under the condition that you get this general studies degree online in the next 2 years or 18 months or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I suspect 3 is a more reasonable number. We tend to have, in my view, too many students taking full loads and trying to work a full job.
That's exactly right.
And so what we have are students, and financial aid drives this, but they take 4 courses and they're working 40 or 50 hours a week, and they don't succeed as well as they could because they're overburdened. And they have children, and they coach soccer teams, and they teach Sunday school class, and so it's not a workable arrangement. Having said that, if we could figure out how to do it such that they didn't need the financial aid all the time, which drove them into 4 courses, which then made them overloaded, the answer is yes.
Let me just add.
We've got a question over here with Laurie. Do you need to piggyback on that now?
Go ahead.
If I could piggyback real quickly, I just want to say that if one were to do what you were talking about, Mr. Francis, I think that what we're generally talking about is an incremental model still. And I think if one were doing something general studies online, that one could essentially have an assessment across, say, social sciences, across humanities, and people could have materials that may look like courses, but they wouldn't have to. It wouldn't necessarily have to be something where you relate course, credits course by course, but across knowledge areas, which could be
yes. I mean,
even more efficient.
Right. The British Open University has had that kind of thing for a long, long time. I mean, there are models around the world that we could build on. Mm-hmm. But the software, particularly at the introductory first 2 years, is excellent out there. And it's maintained, which is the other important thing. One of the reasons some people believe free software is a good thing, and frankly we do not, is because somebody has to maintain that software. And you'd be amazed how quickly the links break, how quickly the information needs to be updated, etc. So when people talk about free, I kind of get a little nervous.
Laurie?
Dr. Jarman, you've lit a fire under me, and I'm sure my colleagues would say that's a dangerous thing. And so my question to you would be, what is the timeline? If I were interested, if I and another of my colleagues, the two of us who teach a particular course, if we were interested in redesign, what kind of timeline are we looking at in terms of that transition?
When we do a national program, we do a series of workshops, choose schools, and then they have a semester where they plan. They work through getting the websites ready, finding the software, developing any write-arounds that might be important for them, whatever sort of ready means. And then the next semester they do a pilot, some large subset of the course, such that you can find all those bumps in the road. And then the third semester is full implementation, we're ready to go. And we have found that in that timeline, we can both help students or faculty understand what to do, get those teams ready to go, solve some of the problems that the registrar might have. You'd be amazed how many problems these have developed with registrars, financial aid people, all those surrounding offices. We've had projects where the admissions people, all good-hearted individuals, were telling folks, oh, you don't want to try that new thing. I'm sure they're not going to keep it up. So you got to get your whole structure working with you. And that's where this institutional leadership is really important.
That leads me to one question I had, which you started driving at this. What are the challenges to sustaining course redesign? It's one thing to go in and plan, pilot, and implement. 6 semesters later, what are the challenges to sustain?
First of all, if in fact it is if it is productive and there are saving money, that helps sustainability a lot. And we don't work with schools who don't want to do both, because you've got to save the money. If it's costing you more to do the redesign than it costs you to do the old way, it will not be sustained. And we've had people tell us, well, we have a grant. Oh no. You know, if you're supporting your redesign by the grant, the thing is over. So that's one reason it sustains. The other reason it's sustainable is because students are learning more. X, math, social studies, science, whatever it may be. So if you can prove it's less expensive and more effective, why would you go back? And then, in a very short period of time, it becomes the way the institution does stuff. And the institutional memory of the way we used to do psychology or science or whatever is very short. So now it is the way we do it. And that's what people will say. They'll say, well, they don't do it like this at our neighboring institution. And faculty and administrators say, but that's how we do it here. Would you like to get a second-rate education? Well, at our institution, we're on the cutting edge. We know this works. We know people learn more. And that's how we do it.
Has this effort of the institutions you've worked with changed the definition of small class size?
At some it has. Yes, I'll give you a quick example. At Fairfield University, which is our smallest institution, they prided themselves on having classes of 35, and all their literature broadcast this, and this was great. Now, when they teach introductory biology, they have classes of 150. They're learning more biology, and in fact, they prove this because in the next course, which is genetics, if you're a biology major, the genetics faculty give an intro test when they walk in the door. How much biology do you remember? And they had a long history of the results. The students now are retaining more over the summer, so of course these large classes are generating better learning of biology, which is now retained, which is measured, and therefore everybody's going, isn't this great? And that's been going on for the last 8 years, and it will continue to go on because there's no reason not to.
Can you pinpoint, and I realize that the average is not the answer, but it is sort of an order of magnitude measure. Can you, whether it's been measured or it's just anecdotal, give us an opinion of where the average class size has migrated at those institutions using course redesign?
No, I can't, because it has become very difficult when you have really big institutions versus really little institutions. And then some did not change their class size. That was not how they saved their money. They may have done it by using fewer full-time faculty with the same number of students. So they used fewer resources and didn't change their class size. So the answer becomes really difficult.
Well, it's maybe faculty-student ratio is probably a better way to to describe it than class size. That's a good point.
Yeah, and we haven't asked that question, but we sure could.
Okay, just to touch on that, when Professor Massey was talking earlier, when we talk about the faculty workload, frequently we will look at semester credit hours generated rather than the number of classes taught, and because there's a huge difference between in one department, chemistry may well have that one faculty member may have 800 students between two courses, and then someone in the English department may teach multiple courses but have 50 students. So part of it is the discipline, and
Yeah, and then they may have graduate students in the one situation and not in the other, so they're getting lots of help, but they can handle more students.
Let's take one more question from Jesse.
Thank you. First, let me tell you, you're a good teacher. You got my attention span the entire time. Let me go back to something very fundamental. And I have to tell you a little bit. I sat here as a university president, but I've taught chemistry and physics and so forth for about 35 years, and taught from 50 to 200 students at a time. My major problem as a professor, and I developed a lot of techniques to get around this, was student engagement. I'd always feel like that maybe I had 20 that were actively involved in everything I did, and I worked very hard at that, and the rest of them kind of sat back and I couldn't reach them. Is the course redesign for many courses like that, the quantitative courses, about, in its most fundamental form, engaging more students in the active learning process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, if we could get more students engaged with the content, more students would pass their courses. And the best way to get to be a sophomore is to pass your freshman courses.
And to get more graduates, we're not talking about spending less money, we're talking about taking what we have and getting more graduates with those who enter.
Yes, if we can get them to be sophomores, then juniors, then seniors, they graduate.
Carolyn, since that was a yes or no question, I'm going to let Richard ask one more.
Okay.
This is really to attest to what you were just talking about. We've gone through that process, and using developmental math as what we're looking at, and as a part of the process, it got the faculty excited, and the faculty actually drove this. And as a part of the outcome, we used to have 4 levels of developmental math that has now been reduced to 3 levels because of what they looked at in aligning the curriculum, but also at the same time taking a look at the Emporium model. They got really excited about that. A year ago this spring, we actually did the pilot and saw the outcomes, and then implementation is actually now happening on all 5 of our campuses. And what it then drives is the next level, and that is the faculty in the reading discipline and the writing disciplines of developmental then said, how come you're doing it for math and why aren't you doing it for us? And so it really drives the dialogue among all the disciplines, and it gets the faculty excited. So it is a good process.
And once you move to developmental math, then the students pull some of the college level math with them. How come you're not doing it this way? So we will see, I think, at your institution, some of the math folks moving forward at the college level.
Carolyn, thank you. Our next speaker is...
Can I make a comment, Fred, just real quick? Just one.
So we just had a comment, so I guess there's no reason...
It's about mine short. I think it would be helpful, not now, but it would be helpful to understand the roadblocks that you face when you go in there to make these presentations, because this almost sounds like a no-brainer to us, or to me.
Yeah,
I want to know why people don't do it.
Okay? Jorge, do you have slides?
Well, David, if you'll introduce
Yes. Actually, our speakers today really meshed together very nicely, and Jorge comes to us as president of the Nexus Research and Policy Center, but he also served as president of the University of Phoenix. And I think what's you may note among all our speakers today that each has been at traditional institutions. Jorge's been at Princeton and at UC Berkeley. So that they all are, have exposure to what are considered the best models of excellence, and come to us today with, I think, some different models of providing access to learning. So I think that it's important to remember, in some sense, these are folks with a traditional background that sees some of the different approaches that may be more viable. So thanks for being here. Jorge's also our mentor with our Lumina grant. We found out about 2 weeks ago, so we're going to be working with Jorge on a regular basis, I'm glad to say.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all for inviting me here. Usually, in a setting like this, I often say, now, quoting Monty Python, now for something completely different. This time around, however, I think that would be out of place, because I want to simply second what Professor Massey and Dr. Carolyn Jarman have said. I think that the processes of the course redesign that you folks have undertaken, and I think that the paper that Professor Massey has presented captures the essence of the best thinking about how to get the best teaching done and how to do it in the most cost-effective manner. I couldn't possibly second more strongly the kinds of things that they're speaking about with regards to increasing productivity and in the economic sense, reducing costs and improving quality. I want to begin with a punchline of, let's see, I'll begin with this, the third, since we have a handout here, it'll be the third slide. Let me begin. I was asked to share some of my thoughts about what it is that would bring about the biggest impact in reducing costs and improving quality at a number of levels on the basis of, let's say, the empirical reality of the background at the University of Phoenix. I'll begin by adding just a note to what David has said. I worked with John Sperling, the founder of the University of Phoenix, since 1971. We were both faculty members at San Jose State University. So all across my academic career, I had been consulting with him and working with him in developing the university. So I have had, as David pointed out, a long history of working in that area, developing a totally different system of higher education, while in fact going through my career in the UC system, teaching at Princeton for a number of years, and ultimately resigning from UC Berkeley to take over the presidency of the university. So it's against that context that I want to say what I want to say. And the reason I say that this first slide, or if you want the third slide, which is my first slide, why it's the bottom line, literally the bottom line, is that I'd like to point out what the University of Phoenix has managed to do from a cost-saving perspective and what that has meant at the taxpayer level. And let me explain it with the slide that's up here. From the previous slide, you can see that the average cost of taxpayers per student at the University of Phoenix is a negative $740 per year. That is, for every student the University of Phoenix educates, $740 go back to the taxpayers. That means that if you take last year's, oh, I'm sorry, here I have, that's right, 2000, that should be 2008. The number is 2008, I'm sorry. The statistic on 740 is 2006, but the number of 455,000 students is from 2008. If you multiply the 455,000 students, which were our students on the day that we reported the closing of the quarter, keeping in mind that means that we have probably another 200,000 students who didn't happen to be taking a course on the day when we reported our final numbers. That means that the savings to taxpayers from the University of Phoenix was $337 million. That's what taxpayers received back as a consequence of the types of system that we put together both at the academic and at the business level. And that translates, if you were if the University of Phoenix did not exist, the translation of that is that all these students would be, let us say, at a public institution. And if the average cost from the analysis that we had done, and we have done this analysis having been vetted by a number of major consulting groups and accounting groups, it means that if the University of Phoenix didn't exist, taxpayers would have to pay about $6 billion last year than they're paying today to educate these students. That's what it would have cost taxpayers if we didn't exist. And I've translated that actually for the state of, just for the state of Texas, and it adds up, in the case of the state of Texas, just one second please. I'm sorry, I thought I had it right at hand here now. I don't know. Oh, here we go. For the state of Texas, that means that we saved the state of Texas last year about $395 million. That's a pretty handsome chunk of money. Now, how do we do that? That's the bottom line with regards to the financial side. But how do we do that? And now I'd like to speak a little bit about the business model, and I want to speak about distance education. I want to address all of the questions I've been asked to address, and they are multiple questions: distance learning, course design, reducing program costs, alternatives to new campuses. First, I'll say that in Professor Massey's paper, there's an example from the University of Minnesota at Rochester. If you look carefully at that example, that's essentially what we came up with way back at the end of the 1970s, about in the middle to the end of the 1970s. That's essentially the model that we came up with, that then is highly touted, and correctly so. I mean, I would be touting it myself. That's what the University of Minnesota at Rochester came up with. If you then add that and you map out what Dr. Jarman has spoken about, you begin to get a sense of how it is that you develop great cost efficiencies. And I would say that the things that I was asked to address, distance learning, course design, and all of that, all four of these topics are really integrally related. And they're integrally related in I would say very, very complicated and sophisticated ways. First of all, the whole process is a very disruptive form of innovation, in the sense of disruptive innovation, as has been written about by economists and by others. That is, it really requires a dramatic rethinking of what the teaching learning process is. And I want to underline very carefully here that the numbers that you saw in the first charts come about primarily because there have been major solutions given to the teaching learning process. And these solutions, I'm not suggesting are again, rocket science. They're not rocket science, they're not overly complicated, but they require a very dramatic transformation in the vision that one has about what the higher education process is about. And so, if I were to summarize what it's about, I would say that in order to get to that situation, you would have to really begin by changing just one thing: transforming the higher education system from a faculty-centric system to a student-centered system. That would be the key thing. If you were to take up as the board for higher education, the coordinating board for higher education here in the state of Texas, and as David Gardner says, I'm one of the mentors for the state of Texas for the Lumina project. I would say that the key thing is shifting from faculty-centered to student-centered education. What does that mean? It means that you're focusing, I'm not going to repeat because so much of what's already been said here really could have been, I could have said. That is, you have to shift to the focus on outcomes, on the assessment of outcomes and on learning outcomes. When you make that shift, and when you then want to add the building of an access capacity to a system that's now going to be performance-based, built with an incentive structure, which is absolutely critical, and when you add to all of that, let me, rather than this slide, let me look at another slide. I'd rather look at this one. When you put all of these pieces together into a scalable system, and I want to focus here on scalability, then you change the whole teaching learning process altogether. Let me give you an example of that. Let's take our distance education. We began on distance education in 1989. We were the first to go out there and begin to test out the model. And of course, we lost and we lost and we lost money. We didn't know how to do it right off the top. We figured out how to do it eventually. But we began in 1989 with it, and today well over half of our students are online. Now, what we did as the key focus on the online education is we did two things. One, that we did not focus on the technology at all. The real focus here was, once again, on how do we get the students, since every single course is focused on the outcomes, the expected outcomes, how could we translate that in a technical way so that we could do it as distance education without reducing quality? And by focusing not on the technology, but on the teaching learning process, and we have always been very much engaged in the cognitive science field. In fact, within the Nexus Research Center that I'm now heading up, which by the way is an independent research center, it's a 501c3 independent nonpartisan research center. One of the institutes within that center is an institute focused on cognitive science. Now, from the time that we developed our online system, what we learned is that the students did better consistently when being educated online versus educated in a face-to-face environment. Keeping in mind that our classes are very small. Our online classes average about 9 students. Our face-to-face classes average about 14 students. So we have never taught large classes. They have always been very, very highly interactive classes, very much along the way that was described earlier this morning. But the courses had to be all designed in the following way. From the beginning, we realized that in order to do the kind of right scalability for online education, you had to put together the best course possible. Now, how do you put the best course possible? You bring in the best people on the topic, you bring them together for however long it takes, and they put the course together for all the faculty that are going to be teaching it. So that all the faculty that are going to be teaching that course are then trained to be faculty members, teaching faculty members. They don't have to dream up the course. We don't do the cottage industry the cottage industry side of higher education, which is very faculty-centered. What we did is we transformed it into an industrialized process. That is, we bring in the very best people, the specialists in the field, they create the course, and then that course, and I have to say that we have a fairly large course design, curriculum development process of people who are just devoted to translating what these folks have come up with as a course to translate it into an actual curricular environment. So then the course, that means that across the United States, at any one time, the University of Phoenix is maybe teaching, let's say, right now in this instant, probably we have 28,000 courses being taught. If you're on the, let's say, the third day, the third workshop, what we would call workshop of a particular course, it makes no difference whether you are in Florida, you're in Alaska, you're in Montana, you're in Texas, you are wherever you might be. The course is going to be following the same structure so that we know testing over and over and over again with a tremendous amount of feedback that course is going to be taught with the same quality within a very, very narrow range. So that's part of the scalability. That's part of the scalability. That's a focus on the student and focused on the student learning. Now, that also means that for in the face-to-face environment, it means that you have to address large issues of scheduling, as probably some of you are familiar. If you're familiar with the University of Phoenix, one of the things that we began doing was teaching in the evenings. Nobody wanted to teach in the evenings ordinarily. Well, we taught in the evenings. Why? Because we were focused primarily on working adults. That was the focus, and it is still the focus. Even though now we're teaching down to students that come into us with 0 credits, that is still the focus. Now, before I say anything else about distance education, I'd like to address Mr. Francis's point, because I think it's such an important issue. Over the last year, we have invested a little over $200 million in redesigning the whole process of distance education, creating a whole new platform of education, and that platform is meaning to do a number of things. But one of the things that platform is meaning to do is to drive down the cost on a per student basis so that we can bring down the tuition of the institution while increasing the performance of the students. And our focus here is on changing the affordability, if you want, context of this. It's not going to be free because, quite frankly, as you mentioned, nothing is. It's not going to be free, but we're going to drive down that cost, and we're going to do it by developing a system whereby we can, at a level of scale, be able to educate the students at an almost individual level, whether they are face-to-face or whether they are online, by using the technology of social networking tools, we work very closely with Carnegie Mellon University. We work very closely with our laboratories there. The person that heads, under the Nexus Research Center, the person that heads my institute on teaching and learning is a professor of cognitive science from UC Berkeley that I've now hired out of UC Berkeley to head it up, and she is out of the Carnegie Mellon institution environment, so that we're going to be focusing a lot of attention on how it is that students learn. We have now put together, as part of this new structure, about a 40 terabyte cloud environment for research, so that everything that the student has been doing since 1989, we have been archiving. Every single statement made by one student to another student in the context of the class, every statement made by the professor to the student, all the grades, all the feedback on everything else will now be coded in real time into that research environment. So we have now built the largest research center for the study of the teaching learning process in the world, because it's the only place where you can actually follow a student, everything that student has done, control for whatever is the environment that you want to control, and be able not only to do analysis as are usually done in higher education, which is to take an N of 30 or an N of 100. An N of 120 is a huge number to be dealing with. We take an N of 15,000. We want to study something. How do students do in psychology when you do this or this or this? Well, let's test it out on 25,000 students. so that we can control for one factor whether they were males, they were females, whether they were single parents or not, whether they come from an income environment that's at the, let's say, $20,000 and below, or come from an income environment of between 50 and 60. We can control for all those factors. And now through the research center that I put together for the first time, we're going to open that up by coding all the materials so that all the proprietary kinds of things that are related primarily really to, let's say, integral business processes that, of course, we don't make public, or and particularly not as a publicly held company that owns the University of Phoenix, but all of those processes that are the key data necessary in order to get to what Mr. Francis is after, which is very much what we're after. How do we drive down the cost to the lowest possible point so that we can get the highest education possible at the lowest possible point and keep shareholders happy? And we can do that if we can put all the pieces together, and so instead of 500,000 students, we have 1 million or 1.5 million students. And then you can amortize, and as you are scaling and amortizing across large numbers of students, then you can begin to drive those costs down. And I think we're going to succeed. We're very focused on that. Now I want to shift to another critical part of the scaling, and that is the student services. Why is it, Mr. Francis, that it is so incredibly difficult to do this for free? Because one of the key things is providing a level of student services that is really difficult to do unless the institution is completely committed to the students being first. What is it, Bill, that you said in your paper, job one?
Job one.
Job one.
Job one.
The students. That the student is job one.
Learning.
And if you do that, I'll give you an example. Every single student, from the time that they inquire to enter the University of Phoenix, and they make an application, from that point forward, there are 3 people that are focused on that student. There is the enrollment counselor, who is very much focused on are you making the right choice? Is this the thing for you? Is this really what you want to study? This is what it entails to study what you're doing. You have an academic advisor, and you have a financial aid advisor, so that the student has what we call a graduation team built around them in order to be able to make sure that the student is as educated, not only ultimately about the let's say the career process, but educated about the choice that they are making. And educating the student about the choice that they are making today is also educating them about the cost of that. The whole structure of responsible borrowing that is a major issue today has to be built around that. So to go back to the points on course design, I think enough has been said on course design. The only thing I can add is that why not just build your courses by having the best people build them? You can do that for the Texas A&M system. You can do that for the University of Texas system. You can do that for anyone. For Texas Tech can certainly do it. Indeed, the Chancellor of Texas Tech wants me to do it. You can certainly create the environment necessary to be able, particularly at the undergraduate level, because these kinds of cost savings will simply have to take place. They will simply have to take place. We know perfectly well that the kinds of transformations in the higher education environment today are such that the public institutions, some public institutions are going to be driven very much to follow along some of the model, at least some of the models that we have been developing. That's why I work with Mr. Gardner, and why I'm working with the folks in Tennessee and in the state of Arizona. That's why I do a lot of work for the Lumina Foundation, because I think we have figured out how to crack a certain nut that's absolutely critical for the U.S. to be and continue to be a competitive nation, which is critical to us. And we have a mission that is very much driven by addressing the kinds of issues that are concerned to you, Mr. Francis, and and from the beginning, we were about focused on access, and we have paid a dear price for being focused on access, because quite frankly, we have brought in way too many students that we knew after they were in and they really started working through, within 2 courses or 1 course, we knew they couldn't do it, even with all the support structure. So now, what we're doing is every student that comes to the University of Phoenix with fewer than 24 credits has to take a 5 or 6 week preparatory course at no cost to them. No financial aid, no nothing, no cost to them, so that they can figure out on their own, seeing what the rigors are during those 5 or 6 weeks, whether they are cut out to do that. And then if they are cut out to do that, we know that they're going to have a lot more, that they're folks with a lot more sticking power to be able to really get through that process. That's part of the focus on the student. Now, one of the questions that I was asked to address, and please don't let me pass it. You'll let me know?
There are 15 minutes left between now and lunch.
Okay.
And I do want to allow some time for questions.
No, I definitely do. So let me just say one more thing. Alternatives to new campuses, and to address the question of alternatives, and you also asked me to address the question of program consolidation and elimination of programs. I'd like to show you a slide on elimination of programs. If you structure enough of the environment in a sophisticated, well-proven distance education system, there is no need for you necessarily to close down programs because there are very few students in them. What do we do? If you are in Montana, if you are, let's say, in Tennessee or wherever you might be, and you want to take X course, but there are very few students that we have in that course, so that you could not take that course face-to-face, well, then you can take it online. Why? Because we can put together a whole class from around the U.S. to teach it. And so by looking at and I think some of you, or perhaps all of you, are familiar with the long tail notion here, by adding technology, we're able to teach courses, we're able to have degree programs that are necessary. They're important degree programs, but the number of students are relatively small in any one geographic environment. And so we put them online. This is something that we have been discussing, for instance, with the College Board, so that we can add, through our system, bring in a lot of the AP courses, so that students, no matter where they're located in any high school, can take any AP course they want, because they don't just have to do it with, the folks that are physically present right next to them. So I am not against closing departments. I have, even as department chair in another institution, I had to close and work on closing some departments. That's not, if a department's not functioning, it's not functioning. I'm very focused on the pragmatics of it. But what I'm saying is that I don't think that that's the key issue. The key issue is, how do you educate students that want to study X when you don't have too many of them in the same physical environment? Well, you can do it online, as you can see from the numbers and the types of courses that are noted in this particular slide. And then with regards to the alternatives to new campuses, one of the things that we have done that has been very successful is the following. Our courses online are all 100% online. You never, I'm speaking about undergraduate and master's degree. At the doctoral level, you do have to meet face-to-face for a couple of weeks, I think 2 or 3 times a year. But at the master's and undergraduate level, you never have to meet anybody face-to-face. It's not necessary. But we know for many, many students, and particularly for Latino students, that they very much want more contact. They want to have some sense of not just the social environment, but some sense of the physicality of the process of their education. And so we began in Plano, Texas. That is, this was a model that we began testing in Texas, of building small centers that have facilities for the students, that have advisement, actual advisors there, etc., so that students can feel all the students that are online have a place that they can identify as a physical environment for them. Now we're doing that across the United States. We have about 220 some campuses across the U.S. But certainly with a well-designed distance education system in the state of Texas, you could have centers, not very different from the ones that we have, that would permit students to have that physical contact. Now, I want to tell you why that's so important. Let me take South Texas. In South Texas, the number of students that we have online is almost insignificant. In the Central Valley of California, the number of students we have online is almost insignificant. We have, for every Latino that we have online, we have 3 African Americans online. The ratio is about 3 to 1. So clearly we have an environment, and I will call it a Texan environment because it's a major issue within Texas, of course, having so many Latinos here. We have an environment where we are rethinking a lot of what we're doing in this new platform in order to resolve the problems from research that I did on Latinos online, on how it is that we can make it more appealing to the Latinos in a way in which it hasn't been up to date. And I think that's a nut that we will be cracking fairly soon. But I'll stop here.
Good information. Questions for Jorge? Woody? Everyone over here.
I guess I'd have one question here, and that is, in a globally competitive world, in your view, can a public and nonprofit educational structure go unchanged? And I'm not talking about global competition in the terms of providing educational services, although I wouldn't rule that out. I'm viewing global competition driving productivity throughout our economy, lowering cost, and in that environment, which seems to be our future, how does higher education avoid essentially being forced to make the same changes as everybody else?
I'm not sure that I'm understanding the gist of the question.
The gist is the structure of higher that we have today and that we've had for a long time, from public and nonprofit education. Is it sustainable in a globally competitive world?
Oh, I think it's definitely sustainable, but I don't think it's sustainable the way it is now.
Well, that's what my question is. Is it going to have to change?
I think it's going to have to change, and change quite dramatically. Quite dramatically, yes. I think it has to change quite dramatically because there's just a lot of folks. The future of the United States is overwhelmingly dependent on educating minority students. Overwhelmingly. 44%. I can tell you exactly how many. If you give me just 1 second. Well, I'll tell you later. But about 44% of all children in kindergarten around the age of 5 to 6 years old today are minority students around the United States. We have to educate them. We don't have our choice. And they have to be well educated. They have to be educated enough to be competitive. And we have totally failed to do so up to this point. So I would say that by definition, we have to do something different than we have been doing to date, because we have been failing systematically. And I'm certainly not pointing fingers at Texas or anyone. I mean, I don't have enough fingers to point to all the guilty parties. We have been failing miserably. We have terrific universities. I've taught at some of them with terrific colleagues and all of that, but they can only address a very in fact, I would have to say, of a major, if I were to pick on one major institution today that is managing to really address what I consider to be the future of the United States, happens to be Commissioner Paredes' former university, UCLA. they have gotten it. They have understood it. Not my alma mater, Berkeley, but UCLA. They have understood it. And we are now beginning, in fact, as of this last weekend, we're going to begin to partner, for instance, with Cal State Dominguez Hills, State University, so that we can work together to figure out how the University of Phoenix, the DeVry, and Kaplan University can work together with the community colleges that are the feeder schools to Cal State system, so that we can unplug the fact that there isn't enough capital there so that the students can get the courses that they need. We can unplug that so that they can keep on taking courses from one of these institutions, and then they can transfer back into the Cal State system when they're ready, or when they want to transfer back if they want to do that. That kind of cooperative activity has to happen, and with the help of the Lumina Foundation, we're kind of like thinking through how to create a model that's a win-win for everybody. I mean, obviously, it's not just a matter of doing it for free. I mean, it's got to be advantageous for everybody, but it's got to be something that works, or the state of California, my dear state of California, is spinning into a tailspin quickly. And that's going to happen, and it's happening in the state of Arizona and in other states. So I do not see the alternative.
Got a question over here?
Yeah.
Ray
Yes.
and Jesse.
You talk about going back and forth between University of Phoenix and the Cal State system. And I notice here on this chart you have engineering and mathematics and so on. In order to get licensed as a professional engineer, you have to come from a university that's ABET accredited, which is an accreditation body. Does the University of Phoenix subscribe to those kind of accreditation bodies so that you can transfer back and forth and still be in a position to go to medical school, become a PE, whatever it might be?
We do, but not for engineering, because we don't teach engineering yet. We are
Okay, I thought
only
you
now.
did, because I saw it here on this.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's not our courses. That's across the U.S.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I beg your pardon.
My mistake. Okay.
That was misleading on my part. Yeah, no,
Okay.
those aren't courses that we're teaching. Not all of those courses do we teach, but in the professions where we do teach, whether it's business, nursing, counseling, in those, the University of Phoenix is also accredited by the professional associations, yeah.
Thank you. Jesse?
Could you give me an idea of the cost to the student? You talked about the cost to the taxpayer, and let's take, for example, undergraduate program in the professions. What would be the cost to the student for 15 hours, 12 hours, or a degree, however you would know the number?
Yeah. The per credit cost, let's say, it varies depending on the what state we're speaking about. But I would say it's probably for a course, for an undergraduate lower division course, it's somewhere around $300 for the course.
Okay.
Something around
that. Let's take an undergraduate program. What's your percentage graduation rate? Let's keep it very simple. Those that just enter and those that actually receive a degree. What's your graduation rate?
I was hoping for this question.
Okay.
I'm going to begin with a commercial. I am in the process right now of working with a former commissioner for the Department of Education who headed up the NCES. We're working on putting together a proposal for the Department of Education to change the iPads with regards to three things: graduation rate, and then to introduce a retention rate, and to introduce a progression rate that we think are critical to really understanding what's going on in higher education today. Because despite all of the research and everything else, I take my word for it, please, we know very little about higher education. From a real research perspective, everybody keeps their numbers so tight to their chest. We know so little about what's going on. Well, part of our process is to make us a little more transparent. So, what do I mean by that? Right now, if I tell you the graduation rate, 5 years ago, the graduation rate of the University of Phoenix was 0. 0. Why? Because today's iPad's graduation rate has to be for first-time students, full-time students, who graduate within 6 years. Now, you have to have 60 units already to enter the University of Phoenix. So while we are having graduations of 50,000 students and 60,000 students, we have zero graduation rate according to iPads. So what I am proposing is changing it to completion rates so that we can handle 100% of students, because the overwhelming majority of students today are what used to be non-traditional students. Now those non-traditional students are the traditional students of today. And so consequently, from a degree completion rate, we are probably somewhere around the 60%, depending on the degree program, obviously. For instance, in degree programs like nursing, we're at about 80-some% completion rate. If you then take like general business, which is almost like a default, it was what psychology used to be is now business. You know, everybody goes into business. Then it drops significantly, and I would say probably, I'm guessing here, okay, but I would say probably it's maybe in the 40s or lower. So it depends on the program. But again, you can't do it by iPads. You can't do it by iPads, Dr. Rhodes. You couldn't do it by iPads in your institution, and I point at you because I really would like to talk you into being part of our study that we're going to do on the application of these formulas in order to figure out. We have to develop the whole concept for the Department of Education so that, you know, we can get past the hearings and everything else and realize the costs, etc. But in a number of the institutions that are represented around this table, your graduation numbers have probably little to do with your degree completion numbers. And that's what we're resolving. So I'm very glad you asked that question.
I'm glad you said that. That's absolutely the case. I don't like iPads any better than you do, and I am at a very traditional campus. We teach, of course, in various ways and so forth, but if we look at our completion rate, it's vastly different than the iPad's graduation rate.
That's right, absolutely.
To make that point.
Absolutely.
I always have to say it's different from the Texas graduation rate, which is higher.
Okay.
Because we measure across institutions. I do want to say we do have student unit records in Texas, so we follow students from school to school, and so while that graduation rate is limited, we have the capability, and Richard does to get into much more detail in terms of
But David, I'm talking about
students.
by institution. I understand you can't do that. It certainly looks a lot different if you follow them.
Yeah, absolutely. And our main goal is that students graduate, and that's reflected in the graduation rates we use.
And we wonder why the public, much less the legislature, is confused.
That's right.
Yes. We have, it's 12:32. Is there one last burning question that didn't get asked? Going once? Going twice? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jorge.
Commissioner.
ETSU?
Enough money to keep going there. What's to keep us from having
Oh, did you really? Yeah.
80s, from about 83 to 88.
You use the example of somebody who's already research.
I sold securities and I got a degree.
Painful process.
most clear here is redesign and standardize courses and learning processes. So if we take that one, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so as group members you need to tell me, I believe that this first one on here is kind of a subset of that, creating incentive-based models for institutions for early adoptions of course design. So I think that's a part of it. And again, incentive-driven course design, using department money, department gets back the savings. And those all tend to relate on the very first page to A2. Is there one of these that I've missed in your group that is about course design? So we have this one, this is a subset, and this one.
Just a footnote on ours, and that was to let them pocket the money,
You say we didn't address course design.
put the money back into their, to incent them to find savings. We wanted them to allow them to put the money back in their pockets.
Okay, I'm going to start on this one over here. So we are in agreement that those triangles match, and I'll make sure that I put those data points underneath. But in terms of, let's start with cost benefit. What?
I think we have one that within one of ours, it's implicit.
Is this?
We implied
Yes, the content, that's correct. The standardized core course content.
If you don't do that, yeah.
That has course design, redesign in it.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because what I saw was this commonality in, that I thought went with this in a strange sort of way, which is the two-year general studies online university content, standardized course content, common course number system, and colleges and for-profit institutions to improve efficiency, delivering a base general education. I saw those coming together.
Well, it's just that, but it's part thought that would be a good place to start. I think ours just has more specificity, that core courses would be the logical place to start for course redesign.
Got it. Okay, I'll put it in both.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go to course redesign. In terms of implementation, what are the chances, high, medium, low, of actually implementing this in the state of Texas?
Aye.
Aye?
I think a lot of institutions are already going down that path at different rates.
Rates. Okay, and so is it possible that we're catching it at the right time to standardize it?
Hopefully.
Okay, and let's go to cost benefit. The cost to this versus the benefit to the state of Texas. The cost, is it high, medium, or low cost? If you can just basically assess it based on all the other high, medium, lows we've done. Is this a high cost item?
Initially, perhaps.
Initially?
Well, I think there's a range of perspectives, which, by the way, puts me in mind, we need to keep our consultants from leaving before lunch, because
Well, we do, don't
clearly
we?
we could ask them this very question, but if it is, the initial cost might appear high because you may be engaging someone like Carol Twiggs' Policy Institute, but at the same time, the idea is it's a quick payoff. So the cost-benefit ratio may be a very short-term payoff, and I think maybe that's why, in one way, Woody, the initial cost is low if you turn it around in quick outcome improvements.
But you also get into the whole question of what cost is.
Yeah.
And when you consider the societal cost of not doing something,
Right.
I think maybe this is a cost benefit. That's out of the pocket today, but it's an investment.
Yeah. And then the other reason that the cost would be low is if you do take a standardization approach, it allows you to replicate it, make it scalable. Then as you do that, the cost drops per course because you're repeating that same solution at different institutions.
The numbers she gave us showed a pretty high benefit to cost. So that seemed to be pretty clear. I mean, pretty significant percentages, and if you replicate it over a large number of people, in which we've got that because we've got a large number of students in the state, but the first issue is the initial cost in an absolute sense high. my sense is, relative to the size of the state budget and in the state and in the overall expenditures in higher education, a relatively small absolute number as well. So to me, it's a low-hanging fruit, as you don't have it's not a big expenditure on an absolute sense, and it's some high benefit to the cost, independent of how big the cost was. It's just a high benefit to the cost.
And the timeline is, when I asked her about the timeline, she made it clear that it was just, we're talking 3 semesters, and so that's relatively quick to see
That's
that.
fast in the academic world.
That is.
Or anybody's world, for that matter.
Right.
So if we simply put like a low plus cost to a high benefit, that middle column, the financial implications of this, is this a high payback? I'm hearing this is a very high payback.
I think so, because, I mean, there's 2 concepts that are sort of, or 2 benefits caught up in the same method, and that is, 1, standardizing, particularly those lower division 60 hours of courses, and 2, improving the content and the quality of the learning outcome. And you get both of those for the price of one when you take this approach to redesigning courses.
Okay, so what I'm hearing now takes us directly into this standardizing and maybe this is all one big thing, but standardizing the core course content. These 2 may be the highest, the lowest hanging fruit and the highest return for us. If we go to the O's, the Common Course Number System, and who just explained to me that, Jesse, were you?
I tried.
That this had a false start.
Yeah, we actually really were pretty active with this before you came on the scene. Registrars and various subject matter professors were getting together, and we had begun to put together a common numbering system for courses that really do have a common, well, that are very easy. Well, how do I say this? That are highly developed. Rhetoric and comp, chemistry, algebra, so forth. And somehow it died. I thought it was a great idea. It's very easy to do transfer if you have a common course numbering system for the students.
You have to monitor it and you have to refresh it because you bring in new faculty that teach courses differently. And unless you're constantly regulating the system, the courses drift apart over time.
That's right.
The other thing, we did have an earlier speaker, maybe at our most recent meeting, I can't remember now who it was, that said their advice, right or wrong, was don't get caught up in worrying about the course numbering, focus on the course articulation, the content rather than the numbering system.
I was trying to make the articulation like very easy, but there are courses that don't change that much, though. Algebra, and changed a lot since I've been. General inorganic chem is a highly developed science. Every textbook has the same chapters, same order, practically. That may be an overstatement. That's the ones I know. Rhetoric and comp, it's writing. There are a lot of courses that don't change with changing faculties and time. So,
well, that's why we've started talking not only about vertical integration, which means, of course, articulation, but horizontal articulation as well. That expectations are the same and that
be the same.
learning outcomes are the same.
That's really what we're talking about. You'd have to do that to have
We touched on this in the earlier. I mean, if you go look at 8 or 9 or 14 on our, I mean, we were off about the 60 hours to make sure that we can cross-list courses so that we can do this, make seamless transfer. So we've kind of been touching around this whole concept. Yeah, right. So, Fred, when you say that there is a second course redesign, but it really fits into discussions that we've already had. Seamless transfer between institutions because the courses were the same.
Yeah, both A14 and A9 at the minimum fit into this category. Anything else about this? Fred, let me ask you about this. I mean, partnering between community colleges and for-profit institutions to improve efficiency, delivering the base general education. We're talking about the same thing?
Well, I think there's that's a difference between the what is the same and the how may be a little different.
The partnering is different, but the...
Right. And this was something that Ray captured as a result of the comments from our last speaker about the University of Phoenix partnering with one of the California community college systems. And what was, I guess, an arrangement, I don't remember the details, but an arrangement that benefited both parties in increasing the productivity and efficiency of delivering that base education.
So
general education.
Slightly different. Well, maybe I'll categorize that.
Ray, did you want to add anything to that?
No, you captured it.
Those three.
Yeah, you remember the gentleman from University of Phoenix was talking about that.
Right. Okay, I got it now. Now I understand. Well, let's take just the standardized course and core courses, and let's rate this, and I will take it back and match it to those other items we already have on the list. So in terms of what are the chances of actually implementing this from a higher education standpoint? What are the chances of actually implementing this statewide?
Commissioner says hi.
We can.
Okay.
We have a Lumina grant that's focusing on that particular issue.
Okay. What is the cost of doing that? Let's just compare it to this cost of course redesign over here, because they're certainly related. Is it a low cost, as we have here, a low cost, low plus cost benefit, or benefit high? It's the same.
Low cost, high headache.
That's exactly right.
It's
low cost.
Depends on how you measure the cost.
And as we
Dollars or
did,
blood, sweat, and tears.
and as we did in the other one, what we said is that financially the implication is very has a high impact. The financial impact on the state could be very high, right? Okay. And I'll put this one, course numbering system, as a bullet under that. And try and group these triangles and circles together, because I think that would be helpful. Let me ask you this. This two-year general studies online university really goes back to A16, which was about online. Should that be captured separately? Should we put that separately than this common core courses? Is that a separate idea?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, let's work on this two-year general studies. This is Bernie's favorite right here. Online university. If we do those, this is going to be easy. You know, if we can do those first two we just talked about, this is going to be pretty easy. So what are the chances of actually implementing this? What I heard from the
snowball's chance, and no, I'm
What would Martin Luther King say about it?
Or Jesse Jackson, depending on which mindset.
Snowball chance.
Well, every university of every community in Texas is interested in it's really news, how you it's a marketplace issue. Way to do that.
And this is a good time to point out that at some point we're going to need to provide the committee with some context, because a number of the things that you've identified over the meetings, there's a foundation for it already in place on the campuses. This one in particular, we've got the Virtual College of Texas, which is the community colleges. We have the UT Telecampus. We've got multiple universities involved in pieces of this, and so there are things in place we can build on. So it's important to note as you go forward and you select those things that you think are important, we can put them in the context of the building blocks that are in place. We've done actually funded course redesign at the coordinating board. And we'll need to let you know more about that.
On that note, and listening to my astute group, and not being an educator, I get the feeling that this implementation, when we say highly likely, doesn't sound like it's going to be very likely unless there's some sort of a mandate coming from something. I don't know whether it's us or the coordinating board, and I'm not sure where it's got, or the legislature, but I think it's going to be very disjointed without some sort of mandate.
I think it's important to have faculty involvement as we talk about these things. I think that one of the problems that you might face in terms of faculty and productivity is the fact that faculty are mandated something where they haven't been involved in the process. I think if you involve them in the process, make them part of the expert core group, that being a part of all of this decision making, I think then you'll have a lot more faculty acceptance of these ideas that we're talking about.
We're going to tell them you were here.
You can tell them that, and then you will find I will be applying to your place of employment. I will be out of higher education. Thank you very much.
Well, I think those two comments actually hit on one of our biggest challenges, and that is, what can we recommend at a state policy level that incentivizes this change, but yet recognize that the change can only be defined and implemented from the faculty level up,
Right.
the folks who really have to do the creative work in whether it's redesigning a course or a lot of the other ideas we've talked about.
So one of your kind of Uber ideas then is the state incentive pool, and here it was provide a one-time award for productivity gain, but it could be for any of these things that we deem important, that you deem important.
Well, yes, it could. Those things we deem important could all be ways to arriving at the metrics. And the key there, we didn't come to a conclusion on what the 1, 2, or 3 metrics should be. We put a couple of examples there that mirrored some of what we heard. But that was the one idea I heard this morning that was a state-level driven initiative, was from Professor Massey, who said Tennessee set 1 to 1.5% aside out of their overall appropriation as an incentive pool for productivity gains. Now, the devil's in the detail. He didn't go on to say how that was measured and allocated, which is really what determines its success.
I'd like, I want to ask the Commissioner a follow-up question. You said that most universities are involved in some level of this, and so there's inefficiency in that paradigm. If we would take all those dollars and focus them on a 2-year college, online general studies college, could we use the same money that's being used in a fractured kind of a way today?
Well, I think we have to look at models that are in place. One of the reasons that we invited the University of Phoenix here was precisely because they have done that. We're going to hear from the Western Governors University at some point. There was a reference this morning to the Open University in the UK that is an attempt to deliver online education at the sort of scale you're talking about, Bernie. So we have to look at all these different models. This is still a very recent phenomenon. And what we see in Texas is different systems and individual institutions building up their online capacity, and I don't think we've quite reached the stage where we're ready to look at ways we can integrate it, because things are still so much in a state of flux.
Laurie?
One other thing that I'd like to mention as far as faculty concerned, the one question that they're going to be asking inevitably is, what's in it for me? And I think one of our presenters indicated it's got to be something that's considered to be valued at the institutional level. If it's not going to be valued in the tenure process, if it's not going to be valued in the promotion process, why would I spend, a year and a half dedicating myself to something that if I spend a year and a half doing something else will likely lead to a promotion or to tenure? It's not valued at the top levels yet, and it's going to have to be valued from the top down before it's something that faculty will consider useful to them.
Great point.
Is there a competitive element in this, in that, let's say that this is done within the next 3 years. So here's this online 2-year general studies It's a lot cheaper. You're going to capture a big market of people who are working, don't have the time to do all, and don't want to get off, even to go to a community college. Is there a competitive part of this that says, oh my gosh, am I going to lose students? I'm Austin Community College. Am I going to lose students? And then is that an issue? Is there an incentive there to be part of it as opposed to push it away, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, there is an incentive. You heard this morning that the University of Phoenix now has somewhere close to 500,000 students nationally. They've got 40,000 students in Texas, and they're growing faster than any public institution in Texas is. So, of course, there's an incentive to do something similar.
Plus the added competition of Virginia colleges and the proprietary schools, the for-profit. We ought to be waking up if we're not.
Like at 2 in the morning, right? Yeah, okay. Well, you're going to wake up because you're to blame for all the Southern.
That's exactly right.
Ben,
no productivity. Speaking of Austin Community College, we have about 8,000 students that take online courses, and some are campus and online, and some are completely online. We have a service area the size of a New England state, so we're already have a campus full, literally, of students that are online, our courses.
See, you already got nervous, didn't you?
No,
I felt it.
I
felt it.
They're a lot cheaper than they are. Come on.
And there's an example already in Texas of Lamar teaching online. They've adopted teaching online, especially alternative teachers
Who was this?
certification.
Lamar University.
And they taught statewide, and I saw changes in West Texas A&M, their curriculum and their approach to how they recruited and how they taught online in response to Lamar got a whole bunch of the market.
So
there is in fact a competitive nature within the business.
So perhaps part of the job of the coordinating board is to actually coordinate the competition. Right now, it sounds like it's people are kind of flustered.
This is also in here where we talk about how hard it is to do, whether it's likely or not. It seems like we have to talk about where the impetus needs to come from, because some of this is going to have to come from higher education leadership. Some of it's got to come from the faculty. Heaven forbid, I hate to invite the legislature to do it. We know it needs to be done, and we say we're not going to do it unless the legislature tells us to. I just think we have to recognize that they will tell us if that's what needs to be done. So it needs to be part of the discussion about what role we be in the higher education circles, what role we're going to play in. Proactive, whether we're going to be a changer or we're going to be a victim.
Right.
And the competitive aspect has to be addressed at some point, because right now we essentially have multiple institutions involved in the same business, and as we're getting more effective with the technology, people can go virtually anywhere, and so to what extent should we be using public dollars to compete in that kind of way? I think is part of the question. Yeah. At the university level, we don't need to do it 35 different times.
I would just argue that if we can get to where we have a standardized curriculum and course redesign for those shared 60 hours of general education, then that's the real efficiency gain. And then you can put it online, or you can offer it through sticks and bricks. But you have multiple distribution channels for the same quality content.
Virtual college probably has close to, if not all the courses required right now to offer a degree, correct? So it's a matter of how one were to take that to another level in terms of general studies.
There sounds like listen to Laurie's comment about getting teachers to want to do this. Sounds like there's a disconnect to why this needs to happen. And it's really a long-term issue that's got to have we're we're trying to deal with it now before it gets to be a crisis.
Right.
And it's really about dollars.
Right.
And those dollars that we've had in the past are not going to necessarily be there in the future. And I think that articulating and defining the why this is necessary, and then getting people to participate because they see there's a need for their participation.
Right.
We've got to do that.
Right.
Anyway.
Because the irony is that California, which is in crisis, could pass us up again because they use that crisis to implement change.
Right.
Right.
We've actually got a bigger challenge in the sense of making that message relevant because we're relatively better off as a state.
And I can tell you from the average faculty member's perspective, I didn't really understand until Rick in one of our pods, before we were called that, said, listen, if we use the formula that you're using in higher ed, it just would not be a self-sustaining formula. It's not a good business. And it occurred to me, it woke me up. And I'm just privy to all of these discussions. And so I understand. But it's very difficult, and thank you, Rick, I think.
Qualified for now.
But I think it's going to be difficult to try to explain that to the average faculty member. I mean, we're so far removed from that kind of discussion that this is valuable for me, and I've been, as I said earlier, a fool on a mission, but, I'm beating a drum that no one has time to listen to right now because we're so busy teaching. And so,
And that's why, to me, the process, whether it's Carolyn's course redesign methodology, whether it's the lean process improvement that others use in continuous improvement, is so vital because it's going to be commitment from the top and creativity.
That's exactly right.
Lori, you just said something that's critical, and that goes to the heart of what we're talking about. We've been focusing too much on teaching and not enough on learning.
You're right.
If we shift the focus to learning, a lot of these things will follow naturally.
You're right.
We've got to go from faculty-centered culture to student-centered culture.
Listen, my background is an historically black college that had little money, so we were all about cost efficiency. And absolutely, all about students. I mean, we had our contracts did not suggest that we were there for just, 3 or 4 hours of faculty hours during the week. We had to be there almost on a 24-hour basis, and so I understand that paradigm, but I think that very few understand that paradigm. We had to cut costs every day and still do it, and do it effectively enough to get our students out of there in a productive way.
To make change, right?
That's exactly right, and not everybody has that mindset, and so I know what you're saying.
Let's put some ratings just to the online university idea here, this 2-year general studies. Chances of implementing something like that? I keep hearing there's really not going to be a choice. We just need to corral this puppy. Okay, high?
High.
Okay. And the cost of doing something like that?
I think the money's already being spent.
I don't know that it'll require a lot of new money. It'll require a much more efficient use of current funding resources.
So, and as we said, if these other things get done, this is going to be relatively painless. So we pretty much got the financial impact would be high. I got to throw this out. If you are not concerned about faculty jobs, be careful. If this were a business and you had all of these pockets around, it's kind of like centralizing data versus decentralizing. If
higher ed were not a jobs program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can teach this course, and I could take it at ACC through ACC, or I could take it through Lamar University, or I could take it through Texas A&M or Blaine College, but it's the same course and the same online course being taught to me. That says to me that you need one less faculty member or I'm just thinking way
Yeah,
out
yeah.
here. I'm not advocating it, I'm just,
You're right.
I mean, that's, if I were a faculty
And
member,
that's how
that's
we're
what
going
I'd
to be
be
able to
worried
afford
about.
to go forward.
Let me put another piece on, that's exactly right, but another piece is, we've been saying since we established closing the gaps, that if we did business as usual, meaning the same student faculty ratio, we'd need 30,000 more faculty members. We cannot hire 30,000, we couldn't find them if we wanted to. So from both ends, this is important.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. This is really, if we're successful in increasing, and we have been successful in increasing the access to our higher education systems, if we don't improve the success, the rate of throughput, and improve the way, change the way we're delivering the content, then we won't be able to afford to be successful. We won't be able to, this is a way of finding means to reasonably stretch the current faculty workforce across the inevitably increasing load of students that we've got to educate.
So at the end of the day, we're not talking about reducing faculty. We're talking about adding students and making the faculty that exists now more efficient to cover the future
And
inflow.
avoiding having to hire.
And I think that that's something that the faculty needs to understand.
Well, the fact is that institutions
Yeah.
have already been doing, the number of temporary faculty that teach courses has gone up dramatically. Particularly in community colleges, in regional institutions. The tenure track is disappearing, for the most part, except for research universities.
So universities have been dealing with it, but I don't know that you can argue they're dealing with it in the highest quality, most effective way.
No, that's true.
These temporary, I'm tired of paying tuition, and my two daughters went to a research institution, the same one I did. They had teaching assistants who they could barely understand. And spent a lot of private dollars on tutors.
I think the faculty situation is so complex, it's hard, we're oversimplifying. Did you notice the data the other day, I guess maybe it's Wall Street Journal, the number of tenure track positions today compared to the 1970s gone up by 7%. The number of part-time adjuncts gone up 300%.
That's what he said, yeah.
Okay, let's kind of finish this thing up. Let's do an easy one. There was, I think, Laurie, this is from your group, investment.
No, it's not, but I like it. Go ahead.
Okay, investment faculty in terms of professional development.
That is specific to cost efficiency. Teaching the faculty the value of, trying to get them out of the mindset of thinking of cost efficiency as cost cutting.
Okay, that's what we were talking about. And I think it also, these two are related in terms of this is promoting and institutionalize a culture of continuous improvement. I mean, I think those two are related. Anybody else have anything like that you can recall? I also think that let's leave this and not rate these two right now. I'll just combine them and put it on there. Let's go to this one, decision support data warehouse. What group?
That's us again.
Oh, it is. That's right.
Yeah, it's what's the gentleman's name? Roberto Zarate. He made mention of the fact that not everyone's using the same decision support data sources to run their business. And so if we had a single decision support data warehouse that we all used, we could all sing from the same hymnal when putting together our solutions.
Could this, as well as the statewide license for colleges to be able to access computer-based software, could all of this go under procurement? I think, aren't we talking about operations in the next?
May meeting.
Maybe we'll lump these together under operations and look at those separately.
I think there's a question of whether or not you need one statewide decision support. At each campus, we have decision support. We'd like to have our data the same. We have to report. I would be coordinating for it if a single one. But,
And I don't know really.
the cost of changing. We have a decision support system. We have a database, and I've got more data than I have information.
That last point's a really important one because we have really a huge database, and we could use some tools to give people better direct access to it because it cuts across institutions. But I don't think we really need a new data warehouse. I don't know what Roberto was talking about in particular, but it could help for local institutions to be able to tie in their own data to that. But we don't need a separate one for various operations you have on your campus, I don't think.
Okay, took care of that one. I have, this one will go under, okay, here's one on momentum points. Explore how the organizational learning model can be linked to momentum points, accountability. Whose was this? And which we talked about momentum on A7.
We were really just linking number one up above to the momentum points, that they kind of go somewhat hand in hand.
Okay.
That if you do course redesign, that it leads towards cost efficiencies through student success, through momentum points, rewards.
Okay. All righty. Any other comments on that one? We got one left. Incentive funding.
Institutions.
Yeah, for
number of
institutions, number of graduates, number of transfers, et cetera. 50% of funding phase in over time. I know we had talked about this, which I couldn't figure out
Well,
which.
that's somewhat similar to the number 2 on the blue grid. Metrics may differ. We talked about an incentive funding pool.
I thought there was something we discussed in the last meeting.
Yes.
We did talk about that.
Jesse was the one who wanted to.
I'm sorry.
Jesse,
I just-
I'm asking about
Incentive funding.
We just want to keep bringing that up. We dealt with it and dealt with it. We don't want it to go.
See, I knew I'd heard it before.
Yeah. You know. Yeah. Yeah.
You did?
50% of the funding phase.
50% of funding.
If I could make one comment about it too.
Yes, sir.
It'd be on there. Instead of, and we do this a lot, trying to deal with intermediate, as I call them, mechanistic steps to get from beginning freshmen or entering students to graduates, and you try to legislate that and set rules and so forth around that, it really doesn't accomplish that much. Universities understand what we're to do, and that's to produce graduates. And I think that's where we need to put the incentive, rather than pick out pieces and parts as an incentive. For example, freshman to sophomore retention rate. That's good. It's got to be there, but I don't think there's a lot of correlation with that in getting a graduate. So let's keep it simple and base it on number of graduates. I'm not against at all basing it on high-demand graduates as well as weighting it based on high-risk graduates as we have in the formula. But I think it's a great incentive.
Okay.
It's beginning to develop. I'd like to see it stay with it.
Any other comments?
The one thing that we talked about, and I don't know that we captured, because I don't know if there was a consensus on how to do it, and that goes back a little bit. I heard different comments. One comment was, can we take these 3 that we had here today and have them do that same presentation at every system and institution board in the state?
We should have recorded it. We could do it online. What were we thinking?
Well, I thought we were online, but we are. Okay. We are online. That's
there. You have it.
But another was you were all handed out at lunchtime when we broke for lunch. Lee Holcomb, our Policy Institute director, handed out this issue brief about how Maryland and Ohio, I think, were going about trying to build. The title says centralized capacity, but what they're trying to do was to create a long-term commitment to their approach to continuous improvement. One of them doing it through an effectiveness and efficiency work group. in essence, I think what Ohio's doing is they're taking a body like this and turning it into a long-term, if not permanent, body to shepherd, the fact that this is not just a one-year, one-shot initiative. The state of Iowa, who spoke to our board back in October, has a director of continuous improvement, an office of continuous improvement, that in their state reports directly to the governor. They actually got both candidates from both parties to agree to its continuation prior to their last election. So, in other words, no one same solution, but each examples of a means of, I hesitate to use the word institutionalized because that kind of has negative connotations, but each sort of systemic means of a long-term commitment to this continuous improvement process. So I don't know how we capture that, but I think that's something that this committee needs to give thought to and to develop a recommendation around.
I'll write myself a note, so I'll put it in here.
And one last note we had at the bottom of our group is that one of our members realized that Elmo was asking diplomatic questions that boiled down to, why am I representing as a representative of health science centers here? Because all of these means, methods, and goals we've been talking about, particularly today, seem to have little implication or applicability to our health science centers. Whether it was deregulating tuition a few years ago, or whether it's the course redesign and the improvement ideas we've had today. In fact, Elmo talked to a couple of our presenters, and both of them said, oh, well, we didn't actually apply that to the Health Science Center in Tennessee. Kind of an answer. Is that right?
Exactly.
So there's a need to recognize that a lot of these ideas don't apply across all categories of our institutions. And what do we do for those institutions?
I just want to make sure we understand the difference between the different institutions, different types of institutions, because the example I gave was a tuition dereg. In 2003, the answer to funding shortfalls was pass that cost on to the students. That works fine in general academic, where you've got 30 to 50,000 students to spread that cost over. You come into a health science center where you've got 2,400 to 3,000 students, tuition dereg does us no good as far as generating monies. So I just want to make sure that we're not all just thrown in the same pot with some of these recommendations that come out of this committee.
It's also good to remember that health science centers have been doing for a long time some very interesting things in terms of the use of technology. There's some things that they can't get away from in terms of the hands-on, but they've been very creative, I think, in using technology in some ways that really make learning better.
Well, the distance factors in West Texas make it forced creativity.
Right. So. And by the way, on Maryland, let's remember that in May, the Chancellor from Maryland is coming, and we'll talk about some of those very same things.
Pin him down on some of
that.
Okay, as usual, we get at least three great ideas. But we're circling the drain. These things are kind of coming together. Y'all did great work. I'll send out the latest update by the end of the week. Thank you, guys.
Good job.
Thank you, Laura.
You earned your pay today. Yep. See you in El Paso.